Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching first part of What If Avatar Naruto saved Princess Azula. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no time, let's start the story.
With the waning moon as the only light source, a cloaked figure dashed through the pitch black forest. The figure, lungs burning and legs hurting, searched for anyone else before pausing to catch its breath. The figure fled into some surrounding bushes even though they couldn't see anyone else. This individual was not going to be taken by surprise, concealed in the undergrowth, conscious of their immediate surroundings, and prepared to leap or run at any time. The figure rested for a minute before preparing to take off once more when a twig broke behind them. The cloaked individual turned around and threw a wave of blue fire into the darkness, setting a few shrubs on fire. "Did you honestly think you can sneak up behind me?" she cried in a female voice. "And for your naivete you'll suffer my wrath." The culprit, who turned out to be a scared weasel rat, fled. The girl's eyes twitched as she stared after the running animal. "Over there!" exclaimed a voice. She swore. Glancing back, she saw three men clad in Fire Nation armor pursuing her. She cursed again and fled farther into the forest. She thought bitterly, "Even animals are turning against me." While the other two soldiers pursued her, one soldier remained behind. With a fuse, the lone soldier produced a tiny black ball. After lighting the fuse, he threw it into the air. There was a bright flash and a loud boom as the ball exploded. Both soldiers turned to face the light. "The signal's been sent. Backup should be here soon. Remember, our job is to keep her within our sights while leaving a trail to follow. Colonel Wong told us not to engage in combat until backup arrives." The other soldier questioned, "Is she really that dangerous? I mean, I heard she went insane. Don't you know the crazy ones are the ones to watch out for? But she's just a teenager, a girl. Remember that teenage girl practically single-handedly conquered Ba Sing Se last summer. Crazy or not, Princess Azula will always be dangerous. Avatar Aang fought and vanquished Phoenix King Ozai 2 months ago. Princess Azula lost and experienced a nervous breakdown 2 months ago when she faced off against her brother Zuko for the title of Fire Lord. Princess Azula was sent to a mental institution 2 months ago. And with the assistance of some rebels, Azula broke out a week ago. She had been accompanying these rebels, who identified themselves as the Phoenix Alliance, ever since in order to meet with one of their generals. Everything was going well until pirates attacked the ship they were on. Pirates, that's right. The Fire Nation has done a fantastic job of keeping pirates out of its waters since before the war even started. However, after 2 months of her brother taking over, everything changes. Although the pirates did surprise them, Azula and her allies were elites and trained soldiers, while the pirates were merely a group of unrepentant, rude brutes. It appeared that driving the pirates away wouldn't be too difficult, but before they could fully defeat them, a Fire Navy ship that had observed the conflict arrived on the scene and immediately identified the missing princess. They were compelled to flee since they lacked the necessary equipment to combat a cruiser. The cruiser pursued them right away, and the rebel ship was sunk following a fierce battle. Anticipating this result, Azula had directed the ship to head for the closest island during the battle, ensuring that they were not far from the coast when they were sunk. Additionally, they used jet skis to get there fast, but not before suffering a few or 6 casualties. With those 6 gone and the remaining crew still on board, Azula had just 3 men left. 2 of the men remained behind to fend off pursuers 2 days later, and a Yu Yan archer killed the final one the following day. 2 days have passed since then. Azula had been traveling through the Fire Nation wilderness ever since, only entering towns at night to smuggle food or board ships that were traveling between islands. Azula hardly slept out of caution rather than fear. She doesn't fear anything, including being attacked while she's asleep, and only went to sleep when she couldn't stay awake any longer. She has also repelled a bounty hunter and 2 Fire Nation soldiers. She was worn out, and Golden Spark Town, the town where she was supposed to meet this general, was still 2 days away on foot, even though she had been supposed to arrive 3 days prior. 2 more days. That might as well be 2 years in my condition. Azula landed directly on the edge of a small river cliff after jumping over a bush. She hazily remembered the same thing that had happened to her during her battle with the Avatar and her brother last spring as she waved her arms to regain her equilibrium, recalling how she managed to get her bearings after jumping and spinning around. Before it collapsed and she fell into the river, she managed to plant 1 foot on the ground. Steam rose from Azula's body as she grumbled and pulled herself onto the ground. Azula scrambled to her feet, screamed, and collapsed again. Her left ankle was sprained during the fall, and she scowled at it. Fire erupted from Azula's mouth as she screamed in anger. She snarled, what else could go wrong? Over her head, a burst of fire shot, followed by several more. When they reached the area she was just occupying, she rolled. She turned to see a dozen soldiers, 5 of whom were mounted on 3 different Komodo rhinos, leaping into the water. She wouldn't be able to run far before they caught up to her because of her sprained ankle. Komodo rhinos were superior swimmers, but mongoose dragons were superior runners. Furthermore, the river was only 6 feet deep at most. Therefore, fleeing was not an option. Although facing them now wasn't a much better course of action, it was preferable to squandering what little energy she had left and suffering the agony of trying to escape only to be forced to fight them. Azula began showering the soldiers who were still in the river and unable to defend themselves with bullets of fire before they could all land. Before an arrow hit her in the arm, she was able to get 3 of them. Azula looked in the direction the arrow had come from, hissing in agony. There's a Yu-Yan archer among them, of course. If there was one, there was definitely another. The Yu-Yan typically collaborated in groups of at least 2. The leader threw a fireball at Azula, apparently distracted. Azula snapped to attention and spread it out with her leg. She yelled and pulled the arrow from her arm, causing blood to pour from the wound. Give it up. Even you can't fight us all in your condition. Azula pointed out that the leader was a captain. Azula chose to light the arrow on fire and then drop into a fighting stance without saying anything, but he was correct. She was lightheaded and dizzy, and she only had 1 good arm and 1 good leg. She would need a miracle to escape at this point. With a loud boom, a large flashlight illuminated the night sky. Startled, everyone searched for the source. A mile or so away, a massive glowing white vortex was visible in the sky, surrounded by golden bolts of energy. One soldier said, "What the hell is that?" Azula gazed fearfully at the whirling mass of light. When 3 white light streaks emerged from the vortex and quickly vanished, her eyes widened. One flew to the north, one to the west, and the final one headed toward them. It's going to crash nearby, Azula realized as they all watched the light fly closer and lower. As the light bounced off a tree and came straight at them, Azula began to consider how she might take advantage of this. Oh, you must be kidding. Before bouncing on land, it struck the water and skipped on the surface once, twice, and 3 times. Azula believed she heard the thing scream as it rolled past her. However, it lost the right to be called a light when its glow vanished when it struck the water. She gave a headshake. That thing could not possibly be a person. When it rolled into a tree, it stopped, revealing to the Fire Nation locals that it was some kind of cloth-covered hump. For a moment, everyone gazed at it in silence. One of the soldiers moved in the direction of the unidentified item. What in the? Everyone was startled as the object soared. The thing yelled, "Damn! That hurt!" It was discovered to be a young boy with peculiar features, perhaps 12 or 13. He had spiky hair, which was extremely uncommon but not unheard of. Since no one had naturally yellow hair, Azula assumed that his yellow hair was dyed. There were 3 marks on his cheeks that resembled whiskers. He was dressed in a dark green shirt with a single short left sleeve. A gray cloud's crest with a yellow lightning bolt emerging from it, all in a white circle, was depicted on the sleeve. A dark crimson vest with no sleeves that was left unzipped covered the shirt, and a bright red spiral was printed on the back. He wore a white wristband on his sleeveless right arm. He was dressed in black sandals, a red belt, and black 3/4 pants with a red stripe running up the side of each leg. A larger round tan pouch was fastened to the back of his pants, and a smaller black rectangular pouch was strapped to his right leg. A gray dragon with its head on the back of his hand was tattooed on both of his arms, spiraling down the length of each arm. With the exception of the more blunted point that represented the dragon's mouth and the long, thin point on one side that represented the dragon's horn, they resembled airbending tattoos. A black headband with a metal plate engraved with a symbol that resembled a leaf covered the boy's forehead, which he patted. "I think this is the first time my forehead protector has actually been used to protect my forehead," the child murmured. The boy blinked when no one answered. "So are you still alive?" He looked around and moaned, "Arrow. Sennin. Great. Where the hell did that pervert disappear to?" The soldiers exchanged glances before turning back to face the captain and the boy. "What do we do, sir?" "He's just a brat. He's not as important as the princess. One of you go grab him while the rest of us capture her," the captain replied. One of the soldiers questioned, "Is he looking at us?" The others shrugged, glancing at the child. They couldn't tell if he was at anything, much less them, because his head was indeed turned in their direction, but his eyes were squinted shut, just like they had been since he crashed. They became tense as he pointed at them. "Whoa, where the hell did you guys come from?" "The troops' faces are flawed. We're the ones WHO should be asking that. You only just noticed us." His eyes remained closed as he gazed at them for a moment before turning to leave. "I'm thirsty." Now he's ignoring us. One eyebrow went up when he saw Azula. "Man, you look like crap." Azula blinked as she looked at him. The shock that someone actually said that to her overshadowed her anger, even though she should have scolded the boy for it. It was the most matter of fact thing anyone had ever said to her. As she opened her mouth to reply, the boy had already begun to move toward the river. A blast from a fireball set the ground in front of him on fire, and he was only 5 steps from the river. With composure, the boy gazed at the fire, then turned back to face a soldier who was still holding out his fist, before returning to the fire and kicking dirt onto the flames. The child scowled. He turned back to the river and said, "Look at you, about to start a forest fire. You ever heard of a little thing called control? Read up about it, will ya?" In the firebender's hand, a ball of fire developed. He growled, "I'll show you control, you little pipsqueak." The boy whirled around. "The hell you call me?" The captain snarled. "What are you doing provoking him? Just grab him already." He glanced at the forest, then at the soldiers, and finally at Azula. "Oi, did they do that to you?" Azula scowled. "What's it to you?" He simply nodded his head without replying. He gestured to the soldiers and said, "Okay, I've decided. I don't like you guys." They gave him a long look. The captain said, "You don't like us? Again?" "Nope. Why the hell should I? You almost start a forest fire. You just told him to grab me. You're about to fight us 10 versus 2, hold up." He glanced over at Azula, who was fighting the urge to moan, and then to his right. "This guy is a simpleton," she concluded. "There are only 9 of them. Idiot." The child gave his head a scratch. "Really?" she hissed. "Yes, can't you count?" "Yeah. There are these 9 in front of us. Then there's the guy pointing an arrow at you in that tree. I don't he's on our side." He was pointing to the left. Startled, Azula looked for the archer. He gestured across the river and said, "And I just noticed the 2 across river dressed just like him." The captain winced as though he had been hit. "So actually it's 12 versus 1. 1? I asked Azula. "Well, you're in no condition to fight?" He was right. And this child couldn't be a bad fighter if his detection skills were any indication. This boy might be useful to her. He might be able to keep the soldiers at bay long enough for her to escape, but it wasn't like he was going to beat them all. Azula purred and said, "Yes, you're right. I suppose I'll have to leave my fate in your hands." "Naruto." He grinned. Naruto gave her a thumbs up and said, "Naruto Uzumaki." Azula grinned to herself. Too easy. Boys will do anything you ask of them if you give them a little boost in confidence, which made Azula wonder in a hazy way why she was unable to find a boyfriend. Naruto looked over at the troops. "That fireball. That was firebending, right?" he inquired. A soldier retorted mockingly, "No, it was waterbending." Naruto grinned. His fist erupted into blood-red flames as he said, "Well, I just so happen to be a firebender as well. Let's go wild." To the bewilderment of the blondes and the non-bending soldiers, the soldiers gazed at his fire in silence before the firebending soldiers started laughing. "What's so funny?" inquired a non-bender. The firebender laughed and said, "He's a rose flame. A weakened deranged princess and a rose flame. This is almost too easy." A rose flame. The strongest part of a fire is its center and the weakest is the edge, and as you move further from the center the color of the flames changes. The non-bender continued to appear perplexed. "Yeah, so?" The fireman let out a sigh. The colors of a fire from the center out goes white, then yellow, orange, and red as the outermost. Oh, exactly. Recalling the lessons on the various shades of flame, Azula scowled. The majority of firebenders began bending flames that were more orange than yellow, which eventually transformed into a balanced mixture of orange and yellow as the bender improved. Flames with a higher concentration of yellow were a master's sign. In fact, Azula was proclaimed a master at the age of 12 due to her blue flames before she had mastered all the required forms. Few people were able to produce blue fire, but she was the only one who could use it in battle. Her grandfather, Fire Lord Azulon, when he was younger, was the last person to be able to. White was the rarest and strongest of flames, but no firebender has been able to produce those flames in well over a century. Some firebenders, though, began bending flames that were more red than anything else. Among other firebenders, these were affectionately referred to as rose flames. Since being a rose flame was a firebender's embarrassment, the majority of them stopped and concealed their bending. No rose flame has ever been deemed a master. Instead, they are all destined to have orange, yellow flames that are at most mediocre. A bitter thought crossed Azula's mind, so much for a decent distraction. One soldier yelled, "Save yourself some pain and just stand down, rose flame." Naruto gave a shoulder roll. "Make me." Wang gestured for the teenagers to be hurried by one of the mounts carrying a firebender and a non-bender. After that, he had the other person and himself follow on separate horses. Azula was about to frighten the charging rhino with a burst of flames when Naruto leapt in her way. "Get out of the way, you fool." Ignoring her, he threw back his fist and punched the rhino. Hito. Hinoken, Way of Fire, Flame Fist. Just a moment before he did it, Azula had known what he was going to do. She was going to yell at the child, but she changed her mind when his flaming fist struck the beast's head. She watched in disbelief as the beast was lifted off its feet, flew past the other two mounts, passed over the heads of the equally shocked foot soldiers, and crashed into a boulder hard enough to turn it into a pile of rubble. Everyone's jaws dropped and their eyes widened as they gazed at the debris. A rose flame child sent a plus 6000 lb. A single punch sends a rhino flying. Naruto whispered to them, "Do you know the main reason why I don't like you guys?" The soldiers shook their heads, gulping at the dark edge in his voice. He gestured toward one of the firemen. "You, M.M.Me. He bellowed, You called me Pipsqueak, Hito. Feirokedo. Way of Fire. Fire Rocket." Naruto yelled as he threw his hand back and struck. A fireball struck the soldier so forcefully that it sent him flying back into the debris. In a state of mild shock, Azula glanced at Naruto after glancing at the fallen firebender. Is this young person truly a rose flame? Naruto's knuckles cracked. Warning. The next 2 minutes will feature the most violent and painful experience of your lives. He raised his eyebrows. Viewer discretion is advised. Screams of pain rang through the forest. A group of about 20 soldiers, led by a big man with a crescent-shaped scar that ran from under his right eye to his cheek, arrived at the riverbank minutes after the screams stopped. With an enraged frown, he surveyed the charred terrain, dotted with craters and unconscious soldiers. He dismounted, strode forward, and roused a fallen soldier with a kick. The man asked, "What happened here?" "See. Colonel Wang. The princess has on the run for 6 days. She's exhausted and weak. Against 12 men she didn't have a chance. Capturing her should have been child's play." Wang pulled the soldier up. "So tell me, how the hell did you let her get away?" he shouted. "She had help." "Help? The Phoenix Alliance?" "No, it was a boy. A boy, as in one single child." "Yes. But this was no ordinary child. I never expected a kid to firebend like that, let alone a rose flame." Wang stopped. "Come again." The soldier paused, recognizing his error. The soldier swallowed. "He's a rose flame." "What?" Azula sighed as she looked up at the dusk sky. She reminded herself that the boy, Naruto, had been beaming after destroying those soldiers, but he frowned for a moment before hurrying over and muttering something about 20.1 people on their way before throwing her on his back and running into the forest. "Did you just huff? If anyone should be huffing, it should be me. I'm the one carrying you," Naruto grumbled. Azula yelled, "I didn't ask you to carry me." With a hint of nervousness, she looked down at the forest floor angrily and said, "And I certainly didn't ask you to carry me while flying through the treetops like a hog monkey." "What the hell is a hog monkey?" A booming voice laughed. "Hog monkey. Now there's a meal I haven't had in a long time." Naruto scowled. "How long ago was that, Kyuubi?" Kyuubi sounded amused as he asked, "Are you trying to ask how far back you were ninja?" "Well, knowing what time period I'm in would be nice so I could, what's the word, survive, Baka.Fox, Naruto shot back. The demon growled. "How the hell should I know? All I can say is that we're at least 300 years back." 300? Well, I had anticipated being between 50 and 1,000 years ago. Azula gave him a scowl. "Bring us down." Naruto blinked. "What? Bring us down? Why? You weren't paying attention. A tree branch almost decapitated me." Naruto gave an eye roll. "We're not moving fast enough for a tree branch to decapitate you. At worst you would have been knocked unconscious and or knocked off my back." Azula growled and said, "Down. Now. I will not die because some little boy dropped me." "Little boy?" cried Naruto. "I just saved your ass back there. You should be calling me Naruto. Dono or Naruto, Sama." Azula asked, "What does that mean? Dono, and Sama?" Naruto smirked after raising an eyebrow. "Lord or master?" Azula burned his shirt. Naruto let out a cry and fell to the forest floor, dropping Azula to the ground. He patted out the flames and exclaimed, "You lit me on fire. What the hell is your problem? I will not be spoken to like that, especially by a peasant." "Peasant? Who do you think you are? Queen of the princess?" "What? I'm Princess Azula of the Fire Nation, the rightful heir to the throne." After giving her a long look, Naruto turned to leave. Well, excuse me, princess. Where do you think you're going? I'm through dealing with your royal bitchiness. Go get one of your loyal subjects to help you. Azula glanced at the boy who was backing away. Even though this commoner was rude and annoying, he had his uses. He moves much more quickly than a Komodo rhino, that's for sure. Coincidentally, the boy had started toward Wangjinhuo, and at his speed, she could arrive there before noon. One thing was clear from that scene with the soldiers. Naruto was strong, and he wasn't easily intimidated. She also questioned whether she could frighten him in her current physical condition if 12 soldiers didn't. Azula scowled. If fear proved to be ineffective, she had one more option that she had not yet explored. And Azula shouted, "Fine." Naruto paused as she sniffed, "Leave a defenseless girl in the forest by herself. With no one around for miles except for those guys who were chasing me. But I'm sure I'll be able to get away with my twisted ankle." He turned to face her, who was looking up at him with pursed lips. His eye began to twitch. "Devil, thy name is woman." Ah, Guilt, the younger sister of Fear. Hours later, just before noon, the two arrived in Golden Spark Town. To Azula's surprise and annoyance, Naruto had run there at top speed in an attempt to finish this, which was significantly faster than the speed he had been using before. As they wandered around town, they came across the market, which wasn't very crowded. Naruto saw that people were staring at them oddly. They weren't at fault. It was unusual to see a cloaked individual riding on the back of another cloaked individual. Azula made Naruto wear a white cloak, and he looked up from beneath the hood. "So here's the deal, Chan." Azula gave him a scowl. Since she informed him that she was a princess, he has alternated between mispronouncing her name, telling her that Chan was a cutesy term for girls, and calling her that. "I'm gonna drop you off at a clinic and then be on my merry way." Azula objected. "No," Naruto whimpered, "now what's your problem?" "I don't need to go to a clinic. All I require is food and a place to sleep." Naruto gave her a doubtful look. He rolled his eyes and began to sarcastically say, "Really? Because I thought I was carrying you because you twisted your ankle. But I guess I've been carrying you so I could feel your breasts up against my back and almost touch your ass for the past 4 hours." Azula put her arms in a chokehold around his neck. She gripped him more tightly and said, "No, asshole. You're carrying me because I'm weak from hunger and sleep deprivation." Ga. "Oh, okay. Okay. You win. Ga. No clinic. Ga. Now let go. I can't. Ga. Breathe." Before letting him go, Azula held him for a few more seconds. Smirking, she said, "Good. I'm glad you could see it my way." "Yeah, whatever. You crazy bitch. Is a hotel alright?" "And what, may I ask, is a hotel?" Naruto's eyes slightly widened. Azula raised an eyebrow and said, "Oh, guess hotels don't exist yet. There are inns, right?" Azula nodded. "How about an inn?" After some hesitation, Azula agreed. 300 years ago, there were no hotels. I said at least 300 years, moron. We can be much further back than that. How much farther? Dunno. Could be several hundred, could be a couple thousand. Naruto faltered. "A few thousand?" He asked Azula, "Hey, what year is this?" Azula gave him a blank stare. "Please tell me you're joking." He repeated, "Nope." "What year is this? You have got to be. It's 15XX. He muttered, "Oh, just 500 years. What?" "Nothing." After taking a bath, Azula came into the room where they were staying, wearing a red robe and a towel around her head. With a look of excitement on his face, Naruto turned to face her. "Hey, Alula. My name is Azula." With her teeth clenched, Azula snarled, "And don't speak my name out loud." Before shaking his head, Naruto pondered for a moment why she would reveal her name to him and then inform him that he is not permitted to say it. "Yeah, whatever. Anyway, you'll never believe what I saw. I swear I saw a bird with a dog's head." Azula sighed after giving Naruto a quick glance. It was just a parrot dog. To Naruto's disbelieving question, "You mean those things are common?" Limping to the window, Azula closed the curtains. She sat on one of the room's beds and said, "Get me some ice before you go out for food. And I know you can't get anything extravagant, so I'll just have a plate of chicken. Pork dumplings with lemon, mango juice." Was it chicken? Pork that she said? Naruto scowled. "Do I look like a waiter to you?" Azula pointed to her bandaged ankle while giving him a fierce look. "Does it look like I can go out?" Naruto gave her a glare in return. "Well, I said you should go to a clinic." Azula yelled angrily, "I'm not going to a clinic," with a crazed expression that caused Naruto to wince. They were silent for a long time. Breaking the silence, Naruto questioned, "How am I supposed to get food with no money?" "How should I know? Figure something out. Naruto was about to scream at her, but changed his mind and walked out of the room complaining. Azula smirked to herself as she lay down and thought back on the previous hour. She had visited an inn in a less populated area of the town with Naruto. The payment for a room presented a minor issue. Azula, an escaped mental patient, had no cash on her person. Additionally, Naruto. Yeah, I don't know what a silver piece is, much less do I have 5 of them. Azula and the innkeeper had glared at him for that. After Azula threatened to set the inn on fire, Naruto drew her away and assured her that he would deal with the situation in a way that didn't make them the jackasses. With a sneer, Azula allowed him to continue. He said, "Please sir, first, give us a room." Azula was certain that the boy was mentally ill after that. The innkeeper, however, surprised her by nodding, giving Naruto a key, and wishing them a pleasant stay. Azula had asked him what he did, bewildered. Naruto only mentioned that he has a look. Recalling the innkeeper's eyes, Azula scowled. They appeared lifeless and drab. With a bag of ice in his hand, Naruto returned to the room. He put ice on her ankle and said, "Here, you said dumplings? And lemon. Mango juice." He twitched his eye. He gave a mock bow before leaving the room, saying, "Right away, Haim. Chan." Azula gave the door a fierce look. The boy was really annoying, dear Agni. But he was useful to her for the moment, until she could get in touch with the Phoenix Alliance, anyway. The boy's very existence would then be viewed as a liability, and all obligations were to be cancelled. Even though Naruto was a rose flame, Azula thought she could have him join the Phoenix Alliance because he was a strong enough fighter. However, she could not allow him to have such a disrespectful attitude in her army for fear of it spreading to the other soldiers. Azula gave herself a sly smile. In addition, she wanted to see Uzumaki on his knees pleading for his life. Naruto had to venture out into the city to find food because the inn had stopped serving breakfast and it was still too early for lunch. Everyone here had the same features: pale skin, dark hair, gold eyes, and red clothes, and Naruto scowled. As Naruto gazed at his reflection in the window, he thought, "I'm glad I used a henge." Naruto believed he could blend in as a typical Fire Nation child because of his short brown hair, brown eyes, pale complexion, lack of whiskers, and lack of tattoos. Naruto laughed and combed through his hair. Classic henge without jutsu. "I need food, and I need money to get that food. Even though I have a lot of Ryo notes, I'm essentially broke right now because money is just a bunch of coins. However, I've been hungry and broke while traveling before." When Naruto heard a lot of noise, he turned to his left and saw the source. A busy street. "I know several ways to get cash fast." His interest aroused, Naruto descended. Naruto noticed people playing cards as he looked around. There were more gambling games going on all around, including another group of people shooting dice and another group pitching coins farther down. Grinning, Naruto approached the card game. When they saw him, 2 of the players, a husky man and a man with a small mustache, smirked at one another, thinking he was easy prey. The man with the mustache called out, "Hey kid, want to play?" With a shrug, Naruto took a seat. The men scowled and said, "I don't have any money." "But," Naruto said, reaching into his shirt and taking out a green jewel. Encrusted string necklace. "I have this. I've been told it's worth a ton of money." The man with the mustache looked at the jewel and said, "A ton, huh?" He dealt each player 5 cards and said, "All right." Naruto scowled as he took his hand. Naruto pointed to the wooden squares he was holding and asked, "What are these supposed to be?" The man with the husk snorted. "What do you mean, what are these supposed to be? They're cards." Naruto scowled. Naturally, the cards in this case were also different. Naruto was a person who won more due to luck than skill, so it didn't really matter. He examined his hand and saw that 4 of his cards had 3 swirls on their faces, with a different symbol in the upper right corner of each card. These 3 swirls were accompanied by a circle that appeared to have waves inside it, an odd trapezoid symbol, and a symbol that resembled a flame. Naruto glanced at the flame symbol on his 5th card, which had a tiny wave symbol in the corner. Mustache grinned and said, "Call." He placed 3 fire cards with water symbols on top. The others moaned and tossed their cards down, saying, "3 wet flames." Naruto's perspiration fell. "Wet flames?" With a laugh, Mustache grabbed the pot. Naruto held out his hand to everyone and said, "Hey, does this get me anything?" Mustache turned pale. "An air cycle." Naruto's perspiration continued to fall. "Air cycle? Really? So I win?" The men asked with a numb nod. "Sweet." He collected the cash. The man with the husk snarled, "You just got lucky, kid." "Yep. I'm not denying that. Yeah, just wait, we'll get you in the next hand." 2 hours later, Naruto joyfully whistled as he left the street with an armful of cash bags. The broken card players, dice rollers, coin shooters, coin spinners, and other gamblers Naruto had chased out were in the street behind him, many of them sobbing over their losses. And the legendary cleaner strikes again. Before long, the fake brunette was waiting to be served at a tiny outdoor eatery. His mind rumbled with a growl. Damn it, boy. Naruto scowled. What's wrong with you? My problem is that you're here playing servant to that girl. Girl? Oh, hey Ali. Lula. Haim. Chan? Whatever her name is. I completely forgot about her, After a brief period of silence, Kyuubi let out a sigh. Why doesn't that surprise me? So then why are you here when you have food sealed in those scrolls? What's my ramen emergency? For E.Mer.Gen. Size, as in ramen. There is a perfectly good town where I could get ramen, so I'm not wasting what little ramen I have saved. Kyuubi gave a snort. A man said, so what can I get you, kid? After jumping, Naruto glanced up at a waiter. Naruto scowled. He must have been deeply absorbed in his conversation with Kyuubi for this man to ambush him. Well, I haven't eaten since yesterday, so I'll have 2 large bowls of every kind of ramen you have, except vegetable, a glass of water, and what did she want again? Oh, a plate of chicken, pork, dumplings, and a glass of lemon mango juice to go. After giving a nod, the waiter left. Kyuubi laughed. Look at you, whipped. I say, instead of bothering with that annoying girl, you kill her and be on your way. I'm not being whipped. And why do you insist that I must kill something every time? Isn't it simpler to simply leave her? Yeah, probably, but it wouldn't be as fun as killing her. Naruto gave an eye roll. I'm going to ignore you now. The waiter returned with a frown. We don't have ramen here. Naruto complained. You don't? No, actually the cook doesn't know what ramen is. Naruto went pale. He doesn't know what ramen is. The waiter gave a nod. Do you? The waiter gave a headshake. Would you like to order something else? Ramen. Chan. Pets whimpered, birds flew away, wild animals ran off, and people stopped, searching the area for the source of the pained cry, both in the town and in the nearby forests. Azula, who had just slept, opened her eyes wide. She jumped to her feet, surveyed the room, and scowled. Uzumaki. What on earth was that fool up to? Azula sighed and paused before turning back to sleep. There was a tap on the window. Azula, her scowl growing, rose and slipped toward the window. Azula drew back the curtains a little and peered out, ready for a brief firefight. A messenger hawk sat on the windowsill outside. With narrowed eyes, Azula opened the window, grabbed the bird, and quickly closed it again without making herself visible. To her surprise, Azula discovered that the letter was from the Phoenix Alliance. She was a little uneasy about how they found out she was in town, let alone the hotel and room she was staying at, but it at least demonstrated their organizational skills. Azula read the remainder of the letter. Wherever that might be, they wanted to get together tonight at warehouse number 6. She didn't mind. The sooner the better. Azula glanced at the bottom signature. Xiao Zhu, General. The fact that Xiao Zhu was one of the Phoenix Alliance's leaders was hardly surprising. During the war, particularly under her father's rule, Xiao Zhu was a prosperous and successful man. Although he was more ambitious than most and more than she cared for, he was proud and conceited like many high-ranking officers and devoted to her father and the war effort. A brown-haired boy with a box shuffled in sullenly as the door opened. Without delay, Azula slid into a bending position. Who are you? What are you doing here? He threw the box to her and said, bringing you your food, Chan. She blinked as she caught it. Uzumaki? With a grunt, Naruto fell to the bed, face down. Azula stood looking at the sulky gold-eyed brunette who had once been an annoying, cheery boy with blue eyes and yellow hair. What happened to you? Naruto sat up and gazed at her, tears running down his cheeks. What happened? I'll tell you what happened, or rather what hasn't happened yet, he exclaimed. Ramen hasn't been invented yet. Azula watched him fall back onto the bed, and her eye twitched. That's not what I meant. What I want to know is... Naruto leapt back up, his eyes intense, no longer crying. What's ramen? Why, it's only the greatest dish to be ever invented. All other foods pale in comparison. A gift from the gods, I tell you. A gift from the gods. Right. Actually, what I wanted to know is how it that you've changed your appearance so drastically. Naruto's eyes widened slightly as he ran a hand through his hair, which was still straight and short. Whoops. He was briefly engulfed in smoke before it dissipated and Naruto returned to his normal state. Sorry about that. Azula's jaw fell and her eyes swelled. How did you that? As if it weren't noteworthy, Naruto remarked, "It was just a henge." Azula repeated, "Henge?" Naruto gave her a doubtful glance. "Don't tell me you've never heard of the henge no jutsu before?" Azula's arms were crossed. "I can't say that I have." Naruto scowled. "I thought royalty and nobility were taught a little bit about how to recognize and defend against some low-level jutsu when they were young in case of assassination or abduction." Naruto thought about it. "And yet you don't even know about one of the basic 3 jutsu all shinobi know. As if a child of nobility can do anything against a ninja skilled enough to even be tasked to go after a noble." Azula, curious about something that might result in the death of one of her brothers, inquired, "What are jutsu and who are these shinobi you speak of?" Naruto was the one whose jaw dropped this time. "You don't know what a shinobi is? You bend blue fire so you can't be one of those sheltered, spends my day in the garden while having tea, princesses. Hell, even if you were one, you should have at least heard about them." He sighed. "Is it really 15XX, because if it is, ninja should have been around for a few hundred years by now." Kyuubi gave a snort. "They've been around longer than that. So, why is a princess unaware of ninja?" Naruto voiced his displeasure to the fox demon. "Do you not know your own species' history, Gaki? You shinobi weren't always the large, publicly recognized force of power that you are in modern times. This is the era where you ninja really were warriors from the shadows, known at best as an urban myth. Are ninjas considered an urban legend? What the devil is wrong with this pointless era?" Azula pulled a face. "What do ninja have to do with shinobi?" Naruto blinked. "Why did you look like you smelled something bad when said ninja?" "What, those cowards who strike from the shadows but don't fight face to face because they lack the skill and power to do so?" Azula sighed. "I have nothing against them though. Admittedly, they do have their uses." Laughing without humor, Naruto said, "Cowards from the shadows. A few things. 1. I'm a ninja. 2. I just saved your life last night by kicking those firebenders' ass face to face. Something you couldn't do." Azula stared at him. "And 3. How the hell do you know what a ninja is but don't know what a shinobi is?" "What, are they related to each other?" As if it were clear, Naruto declared, "They're the same thing. Ninja is just a translation for the word shinobi." Azula gave a headshake. "Whatever." Naruto twitched his eye. "Stupid annoying princess." Azula looked over at him. "What did you say?" Naruto averted his gaze. "Nothing." His face took on a more solemn expression as he turned back to face her. "So what's the deal? Why doesn't Chan want to be seen?" Before schooling her face to appear innocent at him, Azula narrowed her eyes. "I'm sorry? I'm not as stupid as I look, and I'm anything but blind. You had us wear cloaks into town, which means you thought there was a chance we would be recognized. You're hurt but you refused to go to a doctor, which is something I doubt you do normally, and when we were looking for a place to stay at, you weren't looking at the quality of the inn. You looking at the number of people in the area and the positions of the other buildings, making sure they weren't too close to or taller than the inn." The princess's slightly widened eyes and clenched smirked Naruto. Azula scowled. "It turns out that he is a somewhat strong, not so stupid ninja, rather than just a slightly strong idiot." Azula decided to give up some information after taking a deep breath and appearing to relax. The cloaks weren't for being recognized now but rather for being recognized later when those soldiers come with our descriptions. Naruto gave her a startled look. "Soldiers? Those guys were soldiers?" Had she lacked self-control, Azula would have been blamed. She deadpanned. "Their uniform weren't a clue that they were soldiers?" "Yeah, well, I'm not from around here." She gave him a suspicious look and asked, "When you say around here, do you mean the Fire Nation? Because all the soldiers in the Fire Nation wear that uniform." Naruto simply gave a shrug. Azula mockingly questioned, "So then where's a firebender like you from, the Earth Kingdom?" With his arms folded, Naruto gazed at the ceiling. He squinted his eyes at her and then grinned. "Well, I was told not to tell anybody before I got here, but," he said, "if I want you to trust me, then I should trust you. Have faith." Azula laughed. "Yes, exactly. A stupid idea that should never be used again," she thought sourly. "Well, believe it or not, I'm from the future." After a minute of silence, Azula answered. Slowly, with a tone of incredulity, she repeated, "You're from the future?" For effect, he raised 5 fingers and said, 500 years in the future to be exact. "Right." Azula gave Naruto a disbelieving glance. He didn't appear to be lying, and Azula didn't think she was any less able to read people. In other words, he genuinely thought he was from the future. "It appears that I'm not the only person who got out of the mental hospital. I wasn't crazy like this guy, though." Naruto gave himself a nod. He pointed to Azula and said, "There. I've told you something about myself I wasn't supposed to tell anybody. Now it's your turn." Why are soldiers hunting down their own princess? Azula gave a snort. And why would a kid who just met me last night and claims he's from the future care? You're right, I shouldn't care. Ever since we met you've been nothing but mean, rude, and bossy, said Naruto. But I have friends who treat me worse than you have, and that's what I consider you, Shan. A friend. And when my friends are in trouble I don't turn my back on them. So tell what's going on so I can help you. Azula gave him a long look and then let out a sigh. The Fire Nation had been at war with the other nations for the past 100 years and we were winning. Impressed, Naruto's eyes widened slightly, but he remained silent. Under the leadership of the previous Fire Lord, my father, Fire Lord Ozai, the Fire Nation was at the height of our power, victory was assured. Azula's voice became more grave. But 2 months ago, on the day we were going to achieve total victory over the war, Zuko, my older brother and traitor to our nation, challenged me during my coronation to Fire Lord for the crown. We dueled and I defeated him. Zuzu has always been weaker than me. But then he cheated and sicked that filthy water witch on me. They locked me in chains and shipped me off to a mental institution. Naruto's eyebrow went up. Mental institution? Wow, I've never heard that in a coup d'etat story before. He sent me there to discredit anything I would say. Azula sighed at Naruto's perplexed look. When it's your word versus his over how he won the throne unjustly and you're considered to be insane, people tend to believe him over you, Azula stated bitterly. Naruto's expression changed to one of realization. Oh. He scowled after that. But why did he keep you alive and run the risk of someone believing you instead of silencing you forever by killing you? Most likely to mock me by having me spend the rest of my life locked in that awful place, all the while knowing that he now holds the throne. But it's Zuzu's mistake for not finishing me back then, because the opportunity to do so will never come again. She laughed wickedly. He'll rue the day he opposed me. I'll hunt down and destroy everybody and everything he. Naruto interrupted Azula in the middle of her tirade and said, there are a couple of things about your story that are bugging me. Azula gave him a scowl. She disliked being cut off in the middle of a tirade. You said older brother. Wouldn't he be the heir to the throne anyway? Azula yelled at him. I also said traitor to our nation. He left and joined up with the Avatar. And once he stole my throne, Zuko went and surrendered to the other nations. Naruto cocked his head, perplexed. What does joining the Avatar have to do with your brother betraying your country? The Avatar is the Fire Nation's greatest enemy. He has been since the last Avatar betrayed my great-grandfather Fire Lord Sozin more than a century ago, Azula said, expressing her conviction that Naruto was mentally ill for the 6th time that day. With anger in his voice, Naruto asked, is that right? Oh, that's wonderful. I just need an Avatar who is corrupt. She also mentioned the final Avatar. It's been awful one after the other, poor people. Naruto collapsed back onto the bed. If I'm to get my throne back, then I'll also have to face the Avatar. Not too long ago that was something I would have looked forward to, but after what he did to father, I'm now hesitant to do so. What did he do? Inquired Naruto. Had it not been for his enhanced hearing, Naruto would have overlooked Azula's subdued response. He took my father's bending away. Naruto let out a whistle. Wow. With her fists clenched and her eyes closed, Azula said, my father used to be the most powerful firebender, literally the most powerful man in the world. And now he's locked up in a prison cell, literally powerless. I can't let that happen to me too. According to Naruto, so don't. Azula gave him a look. Just worry about getting your throne back from your brother. If this Avatar dude does come around, I'll kick his ass, Dadbeo, said Naruto. Yes, you will. And I'll grow a third arm all of a sudden. Azula began to pace in front of Naruto. The first step to take down my brother down is to join up with the resistance. We're supposed to meet in town tonight at a place called Warehouse Number 6. Azula took a breath. Is there a warehouse district in this town? Naruto blinked. Yeah, on the north side of town. At least I think that's what it was. Azula gave herself a nod. Then I'll start there. Naruto gestured to his right and said, count me in. But I have one more question. Has that bird always been here? The messenger hawk stared back at the teenagers before squawking at them. When night fell, the two people in the cloak headed to the meeting spot. As soon as they arrived in the warehouse district, Naruto began to feel a sense of dread. Something bad is about to happen. Azula gave him a quick glance before turning back to the front. What makes you say that? Naruto clarified, I am able to recognize impending threats and dangers. Unbelieving the boy, Azula asked, is that right? Yeah, it's just one of the abilities of my Kekkei Genkai. To be honest, Azula didn't care what a Kekkei Genkai was. Her attention was more on locating warehouse number 6. Warehouse number 4. Fifth warehouse. Azula grinned. It was there. The sixth warehouse. Before going into the warehouse, Azula checked to make sure no one was around. Naruto narrowed his eyes and followed her inside. Although he wasn't using his Kekkei Genkai to its fullest capacity, he was still feeling threatened and could sense that there were other people in the building. He estimated that there were at least 10 other people present. Azula surveyed the warehouse. It was dark, quiet, and appeared to be deserted, all of which gave her a sense of unease. Azula called, "Uzumaki, light." Naruto's answer was, "Is there something wrong with your bending?" Azula gave Naruto a growl. "It's surprising to hear such insolence from a subordinate of yours, Princess Azula. I hope this doesn't mean you've lost your edge," a dark voice said. Torches were lit all around the room, illuminating the space with orange light and revealing a dozen men in Fire Nation armor, one of whom was approaching them with assurance. The man was older, his armor was different and fancier than the others, and he was not wearing a mask or helmet like the other soldiers, which made his little smirk visible. Azula's eyes narrowed. "General Xiaozu, I see you haven't lost your talent for telling jokes when they're not appreciated." Xiaozu bowed quickly as his smirk vanished. "My apologies, Princess. It's a nervous habit of mine." "Well, do try to control yourself, General. I no longer have patience for such behavior." Xiaozu straightened up and said, "Of course. It's good to see that you were able to make it here, Your Highness. I had heard what had happened to your escort and was afraid that you too would soon be captured. That almost happened. If it wasn't for this boy here, my brother's soldiers would have me in their custody right now." Azula sighed. "I find it a bit discomforting that a child was able to accomplish something several men of the Phoenix Alliance couldn't." In response, Naruto said, "Hey, don't be like that." Xiaozu glared at Naruto and pinned him, saying, "I'm sure they don't suck, I'm just awesome, that's all." Azula began to examine her fingernails. "Maybe this isn't the right group for me. There are other resistance factions out there. The Heart of Fire sounds like they're a competent group." Before Azula, Xiaozu bowed and dropped to his knees. "I assure you, Princess, there is no one more capable of winning the Fire Nation back from your brother than us." Azula turned to face the men who had gathered. "I need an army that's decisive, efficient, ruthless, cold-blooded." Naruto scowled. "Ruthless and heartless?" Kyuubi's cage hummed. "Maybe this girl isn't so bad after all." Naruto felt uneasy when he heard the fox demon say it. Xiaozu emphasized that, "We are all of those." Azula gave the general a direct look. "Prove it." "How?" Azula gestured toward Naruto. "Kill him." With a slightly unsteady laugh, Naruto nudged a soldier in the vicinity. "You hear that?" she said, "Kill me," and I thought she didn't have a sense of humor, though it's a bit twisted. Azula smiled slightly but remained silent. She gestured for the soldiers to advance as she turned her back on him and left. Naruto scowled after muttering incredulously, "You're serious? What the hell? I saved your life." Azula began twisting one of her bangs, concentrating on it. She released her grip on her hair and turned to face Naruto, her expression hardening. "Yes, you did, but you're just so irritating. Plus now that they're here, you're no longer of use. And useless things are to be disposed of." Kyuubi in his cage nodded. "I can't argue with that reasoning, but still, you better take Princess down." Naruto gave her a fierce look. All she said was that he was a useless thing. He suddenly remembered his early years, when the villagers were still quite hostile toward him. One of the more hurtful things they had said to him was, "useless." "Are you certain you want this done, Princess? I mean, as you said, he was able to do something several my men couldn't," Azula replied to Xiaozu. Xiaozu glared at the back of her head when Azula said, "I think that says more about your men than him. He's a child that doesn't fully realize what he's getting into. He doesn't have the stomach for what we'll do, and eventually he'll turn traitor. It's too big of a risk to keep him around any longer." Naruto calmed himself by inhaling deeply and then surveyed the warehouse. In all, there were 40.2. When he closed his eyes, he sensed that most of the men were still energetic. Nearly all of them work as firefighters. He opened his eyes abruptly. "I have never seen so many of the same kind of benders in one location before. Aw man." Naruto let out a loud groan as he observed the men gradually encircling him. "How'd I always end up in these situations?" With a nervous smile, Naruto raised his hands in front of him. "Hey now, can't we talk about this first?" Instead of reacting, the soldiers moved into stances that involved bending fire. "Those helmets are thought," with a grimace, and Naruto shuddered. Despite his desire to punch the Fire Nation princess out, Naruto decided it would be better to start tactical retreat number 2 at this time. Naruto made a cross-shaped hand seal and said, "Well, good luck trying to kill me, because you're gonna have to find the real me first. Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Multiple shadow clone technique. The firebenders exclaimed as they saw the room fill with dozens of the blondes that appeared in puffs of smoke. They all shouted, "And I'm not gonna make that easy for you." Instead, the soldiers frantically searched the area. What in the world? Look at all of them. There's got to be at least 100 of them. What the hell is this? Azula peered at the Naruto crowd. All of these couldn't possibly be real. They must be illusions. However, the theory that this was an illusion was not much more credible. However, there had to be a method to distinguish the genuine from the fakes. In the center, one of the Narutos held up his arm. "Yash!" he exclaimed. Echoing the battle cry, the others lifted their arms. Azula ignored the others and concentrated on the first person to cry out. Azula shot a bolt of fire at his chest, thinking to herself, "I can't believe he gave away his position, he's such an idiot." When she saw that he was blasted back, indicating that she had struck a real body, she permitted herself a smirk. However, when he vanished in a cloud of smoke, the smirk vanished. Naruto grinned at the astonished expressions on the faces of the princess and the general, as well as, he presumed, the soldiers. The clones charged forward, some rushing the soldiers and others flying above them, leaping from the rafters and walls. "Now let's get the hell out of here," they exclaimed. The firebending soldiers started blasting fireballs at the rushing clones, dispelling some, but there were just too many. They were overpowered by the sheer volume of clones, which allowed them to charge through and slaughter the soldiers. Naruto and his clones were able to easily bend their way through the large wall of fire that Azula had raised to block the exit. A number of the top Narutos raised one hand above the other and began to rotate it, creating swirling balls of blue chakra. They pushed them against the wall once they were as big as tiny balloons. Rasengan. The blondes poured out of a huge hole, and the majority of the wall was destroyed. There was a tiny part of Naruto that thought he could have used the door, but this was quicker, and he got a little kick out of demolishing a portion of their base. As the clones dispersed throughout the town, Azula watched with rage. Azula wiped her forehead, a little breathless, and scowled at the perspiration on her hand. It had taken more energy than it should have to build that firewall. "After him," commanded Xiao Zhu. Azula said, "No, we won't be able to find him, especially without creating attention to ourselves." Xiao Zhu clarified in response to Azula's inquisitive gaze, "That's not a problem. I'll just have the local police search for the boy under the pretense that he's a criminal. I'm officially in charge of Wangjin Huo. To your brother I'm a loyal general, using this town as a base to willingly handle the rebel situation in this area, which I do. I take in the rebels whose goals are the same as mine own and destroy the ones who aren't." Then Azula said, "I see. I'll have the boy brought before you by sundown tomorrow." Xiao Zhu gave a bow. Azula looked at the town behind her, doubtful. Xiao Zhu raised his head. "What, as you just saw, General, that boy has strange powers. One of those powers includes the ability to alter his appearance at will." In a confused tone, the general repeated, "Alter his appearance? You mean like a costume?" Azula gave a headshake. "No, it's nothing like a costume." Naruto began to explain, "Henge no Jutsu, the transformation technique. It's one of the 3 basic ninjutsu, ninja techniques, almost all ninja know. It allows a person to transform into anyone or anything." "Anything?" Azula asked doubtfully. Naruto produced the ram seal with the words, "Anything. Watch." Henge. The smoke that had surrounded Naruto cleared, revealing another Azula. Azula glanced at the smirking copy, and her eyes widened a little. She walked slowly around him, checking for errors in technique. Touching and prodding him, she said, "You look just like me. You physically changed your appearance." Naruto gave a shrug. "Just my outer appearance. You even sound like me." It didn't look right on her face when Naruto grinned. "That's right, and I'm not just limited to people." He turned into a cat after taking a puff of smoke. Another puff of smoke enveloped him as he meowed. He was rocked this time, then he smiled and changed back to himself. Engulfed in smoke once more, it cleared to reveal an older, nude female Naruto with a large chest, long blonde hair tied in pigtails, and clouds of smoke covering her private parts. "I even created my own version of the technique." Azula's face heated up and her eye twitched. She winked at Azula and said, "Orope no Jutsu, my sexy jutsu, pretty impressive, am I right?" The pained yell that came from behind the door with the blue light coming from it made a couple walking down the hall jump. After exchanging glances, they hurried off. Gazing down at Naruto's twitching, burnt form, Azula glared. Unloading on him in that way made her feel much better than she had since she met him, even though she wasn't sure why that technique had upset her. "Do not perform that scandalous technique in my presence ever again." Weakly, "Why? You got it." He said. He undid the technique and got to his feet without any visible wounds, saying, I have to stop using this technique in front of women. There was a part of him that enjoyed flaunting his appearance and asking, so besides Orochi, what do you think? Azula acknowledged, it's intriguing, but explain to me how it works. Naruto let out a yawn. With chakra. I don't believe I'm familiar with that term. On the bed, Naruto reclined. Chakra is the energy source for all jutsu. I kind of got that. I want to know what chakra actually is. Z's. Azula's gaze wavered. She approached him and gave him a tap, saying, he did not just fall asleep on me, hey. With a groan, Naruto turned over. Azula shook him and scowled. You haven't told me what chakra is yet. Before hiding under his pillow and snoring again, Naruto slapped her hands away from him and muttered, it's a mixture of physical energy and spiritual energy that all living things have. After receiving what she believed to be a satisfactory response, Azula allowed Naruto to sleep. In addition, she discovered that since they first met, he had repelled soldiers, carried her for 2 days in just 7 hours, and spent the remainder of the day looking for food and lodging in the town without sleeping. He deserves to sleep. Azula reviewed Naruto's remarks while seated on the opposite bed. Chakra is a blend of spiritual and physical energy. She had assumed that chakra was simply another term for Kai, but she didn't know what physical energy was, and Kai sounded more like spiritual energy. And how were these energies mixed? Azula gave a yawn. She could figure all of this out later, but it would require some time and research. The future Fire Nation ruler couldn't lead her army with bags under her eyes, and she was exhausted and had a meeting with the Phoenix Alliance in a few hours. In retrospect, Azula ought to have inquired further about chakra and jutsu, but they were both so ridiculous that she dismissed them as dreams and ignored them. Azula thought she was going crazy and having hallucinations again when he used that clone technique, but fortunately, the realization that other people were seeing what she was did stopped her from thinking that. However, what on earth was he? She was unaware of these jutsu's limitations and had grossly underestimated their powers. It was amazing enough that you could change your appearance so drastically in an instant, but being able to create duplicates of yourself was truly astounding. The princess shuddered at the thought of an army of herself. Before she killed him, she would extract all of his knowledge about jutsu and say, but if you do find him, bring him back alive. It seems he is still of some use to me after all. When Naruto arrived at the main area of town, he jumped into an empty alley and changed into a young man with red dress, brown hair, and gold eyes. He sighed to himself as he went down the street. That was pretty close. Naruto twitched as multiple clones dispelled themselves, saying, I haven't had so many benders after me since that whole thing in Tsuchi no Kuni a couple years ago. Kyuubi snarled, why in hell's name didn't you finish off those weaklings? Naruto sneered. Are you serious? What in hell was I supposed to do with 40 firebenders back there? Naruto winced. Have them make me into a fried fish cake. That wasn't what I meant, damn it. My name means maelstrom, no fish cake. Kyuubi gave a snort. Pathetic flesh bag. Oh, bite me. Gladly, just say when. Rolling his eyes, Naruto ended the call. He had to concentrate on the task at hand, which was to track down the pervert he dubbed Master. Additionally, he wanted to learn more about the world in this era. He had hoped the Fire Nation princess could help him with this, but it was clear that would not be possible, so he would need to find another source of information. Not right now, though. He had just realized that he hadn't eaten all day and was exhausted. Naruto reached into his pockets and found a key, grinning. He was very happy that he hadn't left the inn sooner because Azula wouldn't have expected him there. Naruto made the decision to solve the problem tomorrow and went to the inn for well-earned rest and a late meal. With his breakfast forgotten in front of him, Zuko sat at the dining room table and gazed intently at the report in his hands. According to the report, Azula was thought to be on her way to the capital when she was last seen outside a port city southwest of the Great Gates of Azulon. Something about that didn't sound right, so Zuko scowled. I take it from your frown that it's not good news. Despite the fact that the girl with the bun hair sitting next to him appeared to be staring at him with no emotion, Zuko knew his girlfriend well enough to recognize that she was genuinely interested and worried. She was spotted again, this time outside the port city Hunan. Mai scowled slightly. Hunan? She's getting closer. Yeah. But I don't think her destination is here, at least not yet. That wouldn't make any sense. Mai's delicate eyebrow went up. It wouldn't make any sense that the girl who wants to kill you and take the crown would come to the royal palace where you live. Zuko gave a headshake. No, I meant I don't think Azula's coming straight here. She's alone. For her to try to get to me with all the palace guards and the soldiers stationed around city would be crazy. Well, look at who you're talking about. Zuko looked down at her. Azula may be crazy, but she's not stupid. I know, but it's not her intelligence that's in question, it's her sanity. Didn't Azula banish most of the palace guard for not reacting fast enough to her commands? Okay, you've got a point. But still, Zuko turned to the report again. When Zuko first heard that Azula had escaped, he was so angry that he nearly set fire to the throne room. This actually worked out well for him because Zuko was unable to decide whether or not to remodel the throne room to make it look less intimidating. Zuko had this incident kept as low-key as possible at the recommendation of his counselors. The Fire Nation's citizens didn't need to know that the crazed Princess Azula was at large because that could incite fear that political rivals would exploit them or, worse, that some would dare to approach his sister. Additionally, Azula was regarded by the Earth Kingdom and Water Tribes as one of the war's most serious criminals, and if they discovered that she had gotten away with it, the tenuous confidence that the other nations had in the Fire Nation might be destroyed. The fact that there was still no concrete information regarding the individuals who broke his sister out was another reason to be frustrated. It was hard to believe that Azula had planned any of this, seeing how she hasn't had any contact with the outside world since she was put in there, so Zuko was putting most of blame on these people, but that didn't mean Azula was completely innocent in all of this. He was unsuccessful in questioning the staff of the mental institution because, according to witnesses, the men who broke Azula out were wearing masks that were not particularly descriptive. Before they could be apprehended, the attackers were all killed or committed suicide. The young Fire Lord detested the fact that there were numerous rebel factions within the Fire Nation, but they were primarily active in the outer islands and colonies. Where did Azula go? It was obvious that she and these individuals were going farther into the Fire Nation, where there was less rebel activity. The man who made the independent decision to pursue Azula, Colonel Wong, thought she was affiliated with the Phoenix Alliance, one of the more infamous organizations, although they were more known for their activities in the country's north. Additionally, General Shao Zhu was quickly putting an end to any rebel activity in the region Azula was currently in. There was something wrong with this whole situation. Azula stood in front of one of the town hall's third-story windows, looking out over Wangjinhuo. The general had invited her to stay at his estate, which also happened to be town hall, following the events of last night. She was assigned a room that included a desk with writing supplies, a drawer, a full-sized bed with satin sheets, and a closet that was larger than usual. A pair of gray trousers, black boots, dark red bracers, and a dull red long-sleeved shirt with a dark red leather vest with gold trimmings were also given to her. Even more than a war zone, luxury was the setting Azula was most comfortable in. It wasn't the opulent things she was used to when at the Fire Nation Palace, but after spending the last few days in the wilderness and weeks of being imprisoned in that tiny, filthy hospital room wearing those rags, a change of clothes and quarters as lavish as this was pleasant. Yes, she had come that much closer to living the life she was meant to lead. The princess gave herself a smile. And what, pray tell, are you smiling about? Azula's eyes widened and she went rigid. She stared out the window, not daring to move an inch. Her father, in his Fire Lord robes, was there in the reflection, staring at her sternly. Glancing back, Azula looked at the corridor. Nobody was there. She glanced back at her father's image in the window, who was now mocking her. You're pleased to be sleeping in quarters such as this? Ozai grumbled. You've fallen farther than I thought. At what he said, Azula winced. She gave a headshake. No, shut up. You're wrong. You're not even real. I haven't fallen anywhere. Haven't you? Inquired Ozai. You used to be the heir of the throne to the most powerful nation in the world. A life consisting of living in a palace, enjoying the finest food and clothes, servants at your beck and call, having the respect of and power over the people. And now? You're in hiding, being chased by these people who are beneath you, stealing food, sleeping outside, staying in this second-rate dwelling, not allowed to go to any of the lower floors for fear of a commoner spotting you, fear of these peasants, fear of your brother. Despite her best efforts to ignore him, Azula found herself agreeing with Ozai as he spoke, her rage at her predicament intensifying with each sentence. Azula blew up when he said that last sentence, I do not fear Zuko. Azula exclaimed, blushing, and inhaling deeply to calm herself, remembering that no one else was present. However, the voice was largely correct. Father's always been right. She was one step closer to her goals, but that didn't mean she should feel a little complacent right now. Her current circumstances were unacceptable. Even though it was only a small victory, Azula was eager to move on to the next phases of her plans and reach her rightful place. And then, Father, we'll see who fears who. When I meet Zuko again, I'll crush him without mercy along with anyone else who gets in my way, including even the Avatar. I will lead the Fire Nation and make great-grandfather Sozin's dream into reality. The entire world will be under the Fire Nation banner. Azula promised. She laughed as she left, oblivious to the eyes that had been observing her for a while. Inside the carriage that was currently transporting her to the Phoenix Alliance base, Azula sat quietly. The base was a factory on the outskirts of town that had recently been ordered to close due to the end of the war and was designated as off-limits. Xiao Zu's duties as town chief prevented him from taking her there himself. To maintain the charade, the general had to perform the duties of a town head, even though he was only pretending to be a loyal town head to trick Zuko. She turned to face her two escorts, who were seated across from her and were as silent as she was. To make themselves less noticeable, they were dressed in the domestic army uniform, which allowed Azula to see that their lack of response was due to nervousness rather than professionalism or discipline. They were scared of her. Azula grinned. Excellent. That was interpreted by the princess as an indication that things were gradually returning to normal. Do you genuinely think that the way things were was a positive thing? A voice that resembled her mother's inquired. The two men seated opposite Azula were startled by her low growl in response. The carriage arrived at its destination after a 20-minute ride. Azula looked about her. Since the neighborhood was a virtual ghost town, it appears that this area of Wangjinhuo was off-limits. She gazed at the converted factory that was now a secret base. It appeared to be a standard Fire Nation factory, a sizable dark metal building with numerous tall smokestacks and numerous pipes running through it. She assumed that a lesser person might find the location too foreboding to enter, and it was undoubtedly large enough to accommodate a sizable number of soldiers. And the dim hallway at the entrance inside would work if they weren't scared of the outside. Azula lit her own flame after her escorts, who were approaching with a flame above their palms. No sign of life could be found as they led her deep into the factory, turning down numerous hallways, going through numerous rooms, and climbing and descending stairs numerous times. Azula was growing irritated. How much further must we go? A gulp came from one of the escorts. We've still got this corridor, another 2 rooms, a flight of stairs to go down, and then the tunnel. Tunnel? Azula pondered for a moment before huffing. She grumbled, are there no quicker ways to get there? The other escort said, this is the only way to get here. Azula nodded and asked, did you notice all of those dead ends we walked by? Most of those are actually just sheets of metal that were put up recently as to create a maze to the back of the complex. General Xiao Zu ordered all of this. He's more cautious than I thought. Escort number 2 gave a headshake. Actually, these were already here when the general came to town. The first escort snorted. Yeah, apparently the previous mayor thought civil war would happen back during the summer, saying something about how easily you took Ba Sing Se and how it wouldn't be long before you set your sights on your father's crown. Azula squinted her eyes. She asked coldly, he thought I would be the traitor of the family? She commanded them, who was this mayor? What is his name? Escort 1 blinked. I think his name was House of the Nen family. House of the Nen family. I must remember to have him executed when I'm Fire Lord. The first escort sputtered, execution? Are you serious? Very. He basically accused me of treason, which means he has accused the Fire Lord of treason, and that is an unforgivable crime. Azula gave them a glare. Am I wrong? After exchanging glances, the escorts shook their heads. The second escort responded, no, Your Highness. They kept moving forward, facing a pair of soldiers who stood watch in front of a set of doors. Not much further now, Princess. As guards opened the doors, Azula complained to herself, well, it's about time. The earthen tunnel beyond the doors confirmed Azula's suspicion that they were below ground level. As the princess passed, a second set of guards on the opposite side of the door bowed to her. She was surprised to find that the tunnel was roughly 3 times as tall as the door. From one end of the tunnel to the other, the walls were lined with torches. 3 guards stood outside the base's main entrance, 2 large iron doors that were locked with a firebending mechanism that would require 4 fire blasts to open. Escort number 2 joined them as they emerged, facing the door, and the 4 of them unleashed a barrage of fire. The guards bowed to Azula as she passed, and the door slowly began to open after being unlocked. At last. My journey back to glory is just getting started. As Azula entered, she thought joyfully. The base was a massive cavern, so large that Azula wondered absently if it was natural, and if not, how did they get it this big? There were several Fire Nation tents on one side, a lot of crates and barrels that she was certain were full of supplies on another, and several sparring circles across from that, many of which were in use. Azula frowned as she looked around. Just over 100 men were present, far fewer soldiers than she had anticipated. With uneasiness, Azula questioned, is this the entire alliance? Zuko's defenses would outnumber an army of this size 50 to 1. Her army would be annihilated in terms of sheer strength. Azula pushed that idea out of her mind. That didn't matter because Azula preferred to outmaneuver her opponents rather than use brute force. Escort number 2 gave a headshake. These are all the men in the area. Our entire force is scattered throughout the Fire Nation. That gave Azula some relief. Azula wanted to level the playing field as much as possible and muster all of her strength, even though she had overcome the worst odds and was confident that she could win the day with the resources at her disposal. Strength in numbers was a phrase she discovered to have some truth to it on the day of the comet. She wouldn't be in this situation if she had held off on banishing everyone until after she was crowned Fire Lord. No, Azula gave a headshake. She should never have exiled those individuals. Those were stupid decisions made in her weakness, she decided weeks ago. Azula stepped back abruptly, feeling awkward between the two men who were standing on either side of her. To be honest, she didn't feel at ease in this place with all these strangers. Glancing over her shoulder, she noticed that the door was stuck shut. Her breathing became labored as she began to panic, the idea of these people betraying her racing through her head. Azula gripped her head tightly. No, never again. Take control of yourself. Princess. Azula appeared to have fallen to her knees as she glanced up at her escorts, who were curiously staring down at her. Are you all right? Azula got up shakily. I'm fine, just a little dizzy. If I could find a place to lie down. They led her to the tents after saying, of course, right this way. It was simply that she was exhausted. She was getting so sleepy that she was going into fits of craziness. Azula was certain that it wouldn't happen again if she made sure to always get enough sleep. That was the only thing involved. Naruto pushed himself up on the bed and yawned. It wasn't until he hit the mattress that he realized how exhausted he was. He felt so much more energized than he had the night before. He looked around the room, taking in the orange light behind the curtains and doing a double take. What the? Naruto scowled as he approached, pulled open the curtains, and looked out, blinking in shock at what he saw. Already halfway below the horizon, the sun was beginning to set. He was only now waking up in the late afternoon, having fallen asleep before midnight. That clarified why he felt so rejuvenated. Who knew that traveling through time could be so taxing? However, making all those cage bunshin and pulling an all-nighter while carrying a person probably didn't help. After putting on his clothes and gathering his belongings, Naruto rushed out, throwing the key on the reception desk as he passed. By this point, Naruto should have discovered more about the world and found Jiraiya, but that plan was dashed. Or perhaps not. On the rooftops, the young shinobi emerged. In Konoha, his master was well known as a spy master, author, super pervert, and legendary Sannin. Naruto had to acknowledge that Jiraiya was an expert at gathering information, and after 2 days of their visit, Naruto was certain the man had obtained all the information required to begin their search. Now Naruto only needed to find the old pervert. Naruto closed his eyes and performed a one-handed seal after landing on a building in the middle of the town. His eyes were no longer blue when he opened them. Instead, they resembled spiral discs made of black and white, with a black swirl extending from his pupil like a hypnotic circle. Raibigan, Psychic Eye. The Raibigan has a number of skills, some of which are specific to it and some of which are comparable to other dujutsu. He believed that tracking was one of 3 skills that the Raibigan excelled at more than any other dujutsu. The Raibigan's range of vision was even greater than the Byakugan's, or at least it was greater than Neji's, and it was similar to the Byakugan's ability to see through solid objects. It was not, however, regarded as one of the 3 great dujutsu. His eyes began to race as he began looking around the town for any indication of his master, making sure that every bathhouse, bar, and hot spring was there. He sighed as his eyes ceased to spin. There was no sign of Jiraiya in the town, so he wasn't present. He would need to sharpen his senses even more in order to locate the man. Naruto let out a moan. It's normally a bad idea using this technique when I'm out in the open without someone watching my back, but I really don't have much of a choice. He created the seal with his ram hand. A line of white light, invisible to the naked eye, extended from his feet, over the side of the building, down the street, and out of Wangjinhuo, far out of Wangjinhuo. Kusawake. Pathfinder. The whites of his eyes began to glow yellow. White, emphasizing the black spirals. Naruto's thoughts were filled with images of quickly changing landscapes, coming to a halt when he saw an island. Naruto's eyes returned to their typical blue hue before fading again to the black and white Raibigan. He scowled as he turned northeast. With a final glare off in the distance, Naruto leapt down in an alleyway and walked in the street, hood pulled over his head and hands in his pockets. What the hell? Why is he so far away? And he's on a freaking island, which means I can't get there on foot. Well, I can, but it's going to take almost 3 days to reach him, if he doesn't move, that is. Colonel Wang led a group of soldiers who halted on the path just outside Wangjinhuo. Wang gazed out into the city. He declared, "We'll find her here." The scarred colonel received confused glances from the soldiers. One soldier questioned, "What makes you say that? We couldn't find any trails for us to follow. Since we've been chasing her, Princess Azula has been headed in this direction. That village we searched yesterday is the only town between here and where she got away the other night, and even after our second check this morning before we left there was no sign that she had ever been there." Wong explained as he drove his rhino into town. "Search every inch of this place. She will be here, if not now then eventually, and we'll be here to catch her." Xiao Zhu frowned as he entered the underground base and made his way directly to the command tent. A servant rushed toward him. He gave a salute and began to follow Xiao Zhu, saying, "Greetings, General." "Where's the princess?" "Currently resting in one of the tents. She wasn't feeling well." Xiao Zhu lowered his scowl. "Is that right? I want all officers major rank and above in the command tent in 10 minutes. Xiao Zhu gave the order. After bowing, the attendant turned to leave. "And one more thing. Don't notify the princess about this." Despite his shocked expression, the attendant nodded and left. Even he was aware that it was a bad idea to travel to a foreign country without any prior knowledge of the area, so Naruto decided it would be best to gather some information before leaving. He discovered, among other things, that a bar was the ideal location to obtain information. Naruto quickly spotted one, and based on the low volume of the noise, it appeared that not many people were inside. He crept in and took a look around. It wasn't too deserted. There were enough people here to prevent him from drawing attention to himself right away. He walked to the back and stopped as he passed an elderly man who was balding and sitting alone. The man looked down on him and then sat down opposite the man who appeared depressed. The man looked up at him, observing his diminutive size. "Can I help you?" Naruto cast a sidelong glance. "I hope so. I could use a quick tutoring lesson." "Tutoring?" sneered the man. "Does this look like a school? This is a bar, kid, and you're not supposed to be here, so scram." In a defensive gesture, Naruto held up his hands. He took out a bag of coins and threw them at the man, saying, "Hold on now, I can make this worth your while." The man's eyes widened as he looked into the bag. He glanced back up at Naruto and asked, 20 copper pieces, 20 silver pieces, and 20 gold pieces?" He tossed the bag back to Naruto, saying, "The offer is tempting, very tempting, but I won't be much of help. I'm a laid-off factory worker, not a teacher." Naruto questioned, "Do you know about the current state of the world?" The man gave a nod. The bag was thrown back by Naruto. "You'll be fine." The man put the bag in his pocket. "Lim, so what do you mean exactly by current state of the world?" Naruto gave his head a scratch. "Well, I know the Fire Nation was at war with other lands for 100 years and that's about it. Who are the other lands involved in the war?" The way Lim was staring at him in shock gave Naruto the impression that he had just said something really dumb. "You don't know who was involved in the war that was fought by the entire world?" Lim said slowly. Sputtered, the entire world." Lim gave a nod. "Yeah, all 4 nations. What, have you been living under a rock? After the Fire Nation wiped out the air nomads, we started attacking the Earth Kingdom and Water Tribes, almost wiped out the Southern Water Tribe. We briefly conquered the Earth Kingdom a few months ago after Princess Azula conquered Ba Sing Se, but then..." Naruto cried out, "The Fire Nation started the war? That little?" She gave the impression that they were coerced into going to war. Naruto just realized what the man had said. "You said wiped out. You mean like their army, right?" Lim gave a headshake. "No, I mean the entire civilization was destroyed. Seriously, how do you not know this? You also said they wiped out another land, the Water Tribes?" Lim leaned in and began speaking quietly. "No, we nearly exterminated the Southern Water Tribe, but we were unable to make significant progress against the Northern Water Tribe. It's rumored that Ozai's big plan to finish things in the Earth Kingdom was to use the power of Sozin's comet and burn the place to the ground just like we did with the air nomads. So one nation was destroyed, another was half destroyed, and the last was going to be destroyed. What was the cause of the war? Territory issues? Someone crossed into someone else's borders and it was taken as an act of war? I guess you can say that. Fire Lord Sozin wanted more territory and crossed into other nations to get some, and that was taken as an act of war. As children we were taught that this war was our way of spreading the prosperity of the Fire Nation to the rest of the world." Lim laughed. "What a load of crap. How about spreading that prosperity throughout your own nation? Giving it to others?" Naruto's fists clenched. So this was all just because a maniac wanted to rule the world. One of the women at the next table snorted. When the unremarkable woman pulled up a chair, both men turned to face her and said, "Huh? That's giving him too much credit if you ask me. If it really was about ruling the world, then our borders would have expanded into the other nations." Dryly, Lim questioned, "Didn't we do that with the Earth Kingdom colonies?" The woman looked down at Lim. Yes. But tell me why after we defeated the air nomads we didn't take the air temples. Or why we didn't have any bases or settlements in the southern water tribe when they were so much more helpless than the Earth Kingdom. Lim and Naruto exchanged glances and blinked before shrugging. Because we never had any use for the temples, especially after we killed the dragons, and there's not a single person from the Fire Nation who wants to live the South Pole. This war was nothing more than senseless destruction, she yelled. Committing genocide isn't spreading prosperity, and if that plan for burning the Earth Kingdom down succeeded, that would have meant that 100 years and millions of lives were wasted for a giant, barren wasteland. Lim and Naruto both blinked. They both exclaimed, "Wow. You know, I've never thought of it like that." Lim replied. Kinda makes me more ticked off at the royal family. The woman said to Lim, "So who do you support?" Lim gave a shrug. When Azula was mentioned, Naruto's head jerked up. Well, I definitely don't support those maniacs Ozai and Azula, he said. I'm waiting to see what Zuko does before I make a decision. Naruto questioned, "What are you talking about?" Lim let out a sigh. Seriously, how do you not know? Right now the Fire Nation is split on who should rule. Zuko, Ozai, Azula, Iroh, or someone else outside Sozin's line. Naruto pondered, why is it split so many ways? Because the Fire Nation is also split on the decision of stopping the war. The woman responded. Those who want the war to continue want either Ozai or Azula on the throne. More so Ozai than Azula because, well, he was the previous Fire Lord and he's not an insane teenager. Lim said, that's true. But on the other hand, people aren't too keen on following a Fire Lord who can't firebend and decide Azula is the better choice. And then there are those who think neither one of them are fit to rule and want to do it themselves. Xiao Zhu updated the men assembled in front of him, saying, I've been informed that Colonel Wong is here searching the town for the princess. After a brief period of silence, a middle-aged lieutenant colonel raised his voice, and you're telling us this why? The other officers agreed with a nod. He should have been able to handle this on his own. Sending a messenger would have been adequate. In fact, he didn't even need to inform them. So you know what excuse to give the princess when she asks why she can't go out? Xiao Zhu replied. Speaking of the princess, she's the reason why I'm here. Scenario A is a go. Many officers let out a sigh of relief. A colonel with a long mustache appeared somewhat disheartened. Scenario huh. That's almost a shame, she had such potential. An older goateed lieutenant general questioned, so what's being said about her is true then? They heard Xiao Zhu say, oh yeah, it's true. This morning I caught her talking to her father. The men moaned and shuddered. A young major inquired, does she think that we're the Phoenix Alliance? Yes. Azula's been completely isolated in that facility, so she doesn't know where and how the rebel factions are known to operate, Xiao Zhu clarified. The colonel with the mustache sighed. So we're really going through with this plan of yours? Xiao Zhu gave him a look. Don't tell me you're getting cold feet? No, I'm just thinking about how difficult this is going to be. The elderly lieutenant general sneered. Well, of course. Installing a figurehead is not an easy task. Maintaining one is even more difficult. Xiao Zhu grinned. Yes, but we of the Black Fire Order will be successful. Why do people always turn on me? Azula listened in behind the tent, trembling with anger and clenching her fists and teeth. How dare they? After dismissing her as insane, these jerks attempted to control her and take advantage of her position of authority. With such a position, the idiots wouldn't even know what to do. They wouldn't last a week. They're military men, not politicians, Azula thought scornfully. But she wasn't going to give them that week. And things aren't much better on the anti-war side of things. For Zuko, it's not so much that he has supporters as it is just people going with the flow of things. The woman clarified. Lim continued, that and they're afraid of the Avatar. The woman concurred, there's also that. But I'm like a lot of other people and can't accept that kid as Fire Lord. In the course of 1 year he went from being the banished prince to the fugitive prince to the redeemed prince to the traitor prince to Fire Lord, and he betrayed a lot of people during that time. Who knows what he'll decide to be and whose side he'll decide to be on next, and Iroh's no better. Who's Iroh? Inquired Naruto. The woman replied, Zuko's uncle and the former crown prince, Azulon's first son. He's the first son. How the hell did Ozai get the crown? It was weird. Unlike Zuko, Iroh was the pride of the Fire Nation, the famous dragon of the West, but out of nowhere, at Azulon's funeral, Azulon had named Ozai as his successor. Lim took a sip of his beverage. Many people were expecting a huge battle over the crown, but Iroh never challenged Ozai. Naruto believed he understood the rest, so he was scared, and now that Ozai's powerless he's making a play for the throne. The woman gave an eye roll. Are you kidding? He's refusing the crown and is running a tea shop in Ba Sing Se. Naruto collapsed from his seat. And it's a well-known fact Iroh cares deeply for Zuko. Lim continued. I heard that Iroh encouraged Zuko to take the throne. The woman sneered. She began enumerating on her hand, neither of them deserves the crown. No one in that family does. Ozai's a megalomaniac calling himself the Phoenix King. Azula's an insane sociopath. Iroh's a lazy fool who'd rather serve tea in the Earth Kingdom than rule the Fire Nation, and I already told you what I think about Zuko. Lim gave her a look. So you're one of those who hate the whole Sozin line? She struck the table with her fist. That's right. Sozin started this war that took the lives of my father, brothers, and sister. Ozai and Azula were going to further turn this war into mindless destruction, caring nothing about anything but furthering themselves. And Zuko and Iroh are being called heroes and being treated as if they've done nothing wrong when they are probably the only people who have fought against every nation. Xiao Zhu got to his feet. As he emerged from the tent, he was immediately drawn to the iron doors that were opening. Well, if you'll excuse gentlemen, a mayor's duty is never done. He scowled as he saw a small figure in a cloak leave through the doors, the guards bowing to him. When explosions shook the area, he took a few steps. Xiao Zhu whirled around in alarm as he saw their arsenal of weapons, which was now largely on fire. Frantically scanning the area, the other senior officers fled the tent. One colonel yelled, "What happened? Are we under attack?" One of the soldiers faced him. No, sir. Seems one of the barrels of blasting jelly caught fire and exploded, igniting several other barrels. Xiao Zhu looked back at the massive blaze, which was being fueled by yet another explosion. He felt like killing. That was the majority of their supply of weapons. Who in hell would play with fire near barrels of exploding jelly? The person who did this would be severely harmed. General Xiao Zhu, sir. Xiao Zhu turned to face his attendant, observing his burnt shoulder and unkempt appearance. The princess. She heard about the meeting and wanted to attend. Xiao Zhu already disapproved of the direction this was taking. I managed to change her mind and lead her to her tent, but when we got inside she attacked me. Xiao Zhu took hold of the man's collar. Where is she? He chokingly said, Gee. Gone. Xiao Zhu snapped his head in the direction of the doors as his eyes grew wide. The individual wearing the cloak. The general roared like a beast. Azula. The basic idea behind firebending is to strike them before they get you. Azula had mastered it years before. Azula rushed up the stairs of the factory after breaking in. The guards followed her with blank stares. Princess Azula. They were startled to their feet by an explosion outside the door. In order to get through the factory's maze, Azula would need a lot of time, so she hoped that the bombs she threw would cause enough of a roof to fall. Fortunately, Azula had been keeping a careful eye on their path. She remembered something and halted as she passed a dead end. Azula nodded and asked, Did you notice all of those dead ends we walked by? Most of those are actually just sheets of metal that were put up recently as to create a maze to the back of the complex. With a determined expression on her face, Azula gazed at the wall. Azula inhaled deeply before lowering herself into a wide stance and spinning her arms in broad arcs, leaving a trail of electricity behind her outstretched fingers. She pressed her fingers together before extending her hand. The wall was struck by a bolt of lightning that blasted a hole in it. With a sly smile, Azula leapt through the opening. Naruto remained quiet for a while. Is Azula really as dangerous as you say? Lim nodded and said, Oh yeah. The Earth Kingdom capital, Ba Sing Se, for 100 years we were unable to conquer that city. Even Iroh, who laid siege to it for 600 days, was unsuccessful. But Azula, with just a couple of her friends, conquered it in like a week. Naruto's gaze expanded. Crap, he exclaimed as he leapt from his chair and ran to the door. She said, Hey, what's wrong? He called back, I royally fucked up, before he stopped and jogged back to the table in reverse. They watched him go about halfway to the door. One more thing. Is the current avatar a good guy? The two blinked and then responded at the same time, Yeah. Naruto's eye twitched and his mouth was drawn in a thin line. He gave himself a nod. Oh yeah. I'm so kicking her butt. He then hurried out of the bar, surprising the woman by throwing a bag of coins at her. He not only saved the life of a deranged princess who was determined to destroy the world, but he also assisted her in communicating with her army. Jiraiya needed to take action now, or else he would have to wait. He had not yet determined exactly what he was going to do. Naruto was knocked off his feet after slamming into something as he was leaving the bar. Naruto thought sarcastically, well, this is a great start. The object he collided with let out a moan. Hey, watch where you're going, you little. Hey, it's you. Naruto glanced up at a soldier and his gang of friends' irate faces. Yes, fantastic beginning. Making those shortcuts might not have been as beneficial as Azula had hoped in retrospect. In the first place, she lost her bearings when she took those shortcuts, and in the second place, she had to blast through 6 more walls, and shooting that much lightning had exhausted Azula. She was a little rusty and out of shape, but what else could she have expected after spending 2 months in a mental institution with her feet shackled to a bed and her jacket straight? Azula had to pause to catch her breath just 2 blocks from the factory. Azula turned down an alley, leaned against a wall, and started reviewing the facts. She needed to leave town quickly to avoid being trapped. Xiao Zhu was most likely already giving the order to establish a perimeter. The harbor was located in the northeastern section of the town, but it was unlikely that the general would close it, so there was no way to leave. Returning to the wilderness would be her best option for escape. Azula winced. The last thing she wanted to do was that. Living in the wild was not only embarrassing and annoying, but she never bothered to learn how to do it because she was a princess who had grown up in a palace with servants to attend to all of her needs. She had to steal from towns to survive, and she was certain that was how Colonel Wong had found her. Before she could think about it any longer, 2 soldiers passed by and saw her. There she is. With a curse, Azula ran farther into the town. Watching a fireball sail into a fruit stand, Naruto ducked under it. He returned the call, "Hey, watch it." The young shinobi had to roll out of the way as several more fireballs flew at him. Naruto clenched his teeth and leapt forward, heading down a different street. As another group of soldiers pursued him, he instantly turned and fled in the other direction. Naruto eventually came to a crowded street after turning down a number of other streets. Naruto smirked as he leapt over the throngs of people running on the rooftops. You know what the best thing is about roof hopping? No crowds up here to slow you down. The teenager chided. When his head began to pound, he stopped laughing and leapt to the other side of the street, where a fireball crashed into his previous location. Early danger detection, thank you. Naruto scowled as he looked at the fire that was spreading. Naruto wasn't expecting the soldiers to be the ones causing the property damage, but he was expecting it nonetheless. Naruto continued to stare at the fire, wondering how they were able to fire in such a crowded place. Looking back, the blonde received his response. More soldiers on those strange-looking rhinos had joined the pursuing troops, and the crowd had dispersed to make room for them. The large scarred man riding at the head was glaring at him especially fiercely. Naruto moaned, "Are you serious? That's so unfair." Wong gave the escaping boy a scowl. "Do not lose him, he's our only lead to Princess Azula." Naruto nearly lost his footing. He turned to the soldiers in rage. Naruto's EDD fired off once more. "That's why you're chasing me." Because of her. Hearing the familiar whistle of metal piercing the air, he leapt. Before turning to face the Yu Yan archers running across from him, he glanced down at the arrows embedded in the roof. Naruto used multiple kunai to counter the additional arrows they fired. He threw a kunai with an explosive node attached ahead of the archers, saying, "Normally, I'd play with you for a while, but I'm just not in the mood for that right now." Before they were flung back by the explosion, the Yu Yan examined what they believed to be a poorly thrown knife and the strangely tied piece of slow, burning paper. With no roof left to run on, Naruto leapt to the streets. When he looked back, he could see that he was still far ahead of the soldiers and that the distance between them was gradually growing. He burst out laughing. "You and your freaky-looking rhinos will never catch me," he exclaimed. At that moment, over a dozen soldiers moved in front of him. With the soldiers right behind him, Naruto yelled, "It's the kid from last night," and turned down another street. "Just when I thought you couldn't get any more pathetic. I have no time for this. I'm being pursued here, in case you missed it." Kyuubi snarled. "You should be tearing through these fools instead of running away." "Are you serious? How many firemen are behind me, do you know? Against them, I have no chance." Kyuubi scoffed and said, "You're such a moron. Did you forget that you're in the past? Things are different here." "Like what?" "Like how benders in this time period are much weaker than the benders in our own." "Really?" Naruto wasn't convinced. "You doubt me? At this point in time mortals mainly fight using bending. And they bend without any jutsu. There are very few in the world right now who knows how to use chakra. They are still bending. Yes, and you saw firsthand how pathetic it was when you defeated those firebenders the other night." Naruto reflected on it. He didn't really think about it because he was so angry before the fight and so high on adrenaline afterward, but now that he realized they were surprisingly easy to defeat. He has never faced a firebender so easily, and it was even more startling because there were multiple of them. Normally, he would have to exert all of his effort against that many firebenders. Every bender I had previously faced was at least Chunin level. However, dealing with those guys was like battling bandits who were skilled with fire. One of the soldiers raised his voice. Listen, the princess changed her mind. She would prefer that you'd be brought back alive, but she would also understand if alive wasn't possible, so surrender quietly and you'll get to live longer. My instincts are telling me to go for it, but my mind is telling me not to, Naruto said, stopping his run to confront the soldiers. I've been taught to always follow my instincts. Naruto pushed out his fist and said, Is that right? Well, I've got news for you, buddy. I'm taking you, Chan, and your entire organization down. Disappointed, the soldier shook his head. Before directing the soldiers to charge, he said, Don't say we didn't give you a chance, kid. After igniting his fists, Naruto fled in the direction of the advancing soldiers. As the soldiers aimed their spears or punched out fireballs at him, Naruto retaliated by quickly striking them with his flaming fists, his hands appearing to grow in number. The charging opponents clashed during Hito, Rensha Shindo, Fire Art, Rapid, Fire Impact, and now stood back, both sides in an attack stance. The soldiers of the Fire Nation fell apart in a matter of seconds. Innocently scratching the back of his head, Naruto straightened up and faced them again, his fox-like squint fixed on them. Wow, you guys do suck. Naruto dispersed the fireball that had been thrown at him by thrusting his arm to the side while continuing to gaze at the fallen men. He looked at Wong and his men, whose hand was still outstretched from his attack. Hey, enough with the fire blasts already. I'm not your enemy. Wong's eyes narrowed. I'm supposed to believe that after you attack my men and these town guards, and aid and abet a fugitive? Naruto rubbed his neck and laughed nervously. That was all just a misunderstanding on my part. I thought you guys were. Although it is hard to believe that a pipsqueak rose flamer like you defeated any of my men, Wong replied. After a moment of inaction, Naruto twitched. He smiled softly and asked himself, did he just say, pipsqueak? Wong looked around at a few of his men. Is this runt really the one we're looking for? Naruto continued to twitch. Darkly, he murmured, Runt. The men nodded and shuddered under the gaze of their superior. A soldier defended them by saying, Yes, sir. But like we said, he's stronger than he looks. After examining Naruto for a while, Wong turned back to him and laughed. Naruto began to twitch more violently, saying, He looks puny to me. Wong turned back to the first group of men and commanded another group, Get him. When this is all over, expect your military qualifications to be reevaluated. It's embarrassing for you to lose to some punk kid. A body swung between them and grunted as it hit the ground. The colonel turned forward in surprise, seeing several more of his men flying in his direction. In order to avoid being struck by one of his flying men, Wong rolled off his mount. With a flaming fist out in front of him and his eyes shadowed, Naruto stood amid awe-stricken soldiers. Naruto stated in a quiet yet solemn voice, That was 3. As he ran past the men gathered around him, Naruto yelled, You called me, runt, pipsqueak, and puny. You better watch out, because this puny pipsqueak runt is going to kick your ass. He was shot at the back by 2 firemen. After glancing back at the fireballs, Naruto spun around and kicked a roundhouse kick, turning the flames red and launching them back at the soldiers with even more force and speed, knocking them off their feet as he proceeded in the direction of Wong. Wong snarled and threw streams of fire at the boy with 2 of his men. Naruto sneered at the approaching fire. It will take more than that to stop me, he said, pulling his arms back and taking a deep breath. Hito. Karyumir. Fire Art. Fire Dragon Swarm. Naruto let out a third blast of fire from his mouth and 2 massive dragon-shaped flashes from his hands. Since rose flamers are known to have the weakest flames and, as children, were incapable of producing an average number of flames, the Fire Nation men were taken aback by Naruto's attack's size as well as how easily it destroyed their own flames. Wong and the 2 men jumped out of the way of the flames that exploded as they hit the ground. Wong's expression was wild as he rolled back to his feet. Attack! All firebenders attack now. Naruto was engulfed in a huge ball of flame as fire erupted from both the front and the back. The young ninja vanished as the fire subsided, leaving behind a charred log. While the others gazed at the burnt piece of wood that they knew had never been there before, Wong and the majority of the soldiers searched the area for the boy. A red light suddenly flared over them. When the soldiers saw the enormous ball of fire that Naruto was holding above him as he hung in midair, they looked up and were astounded. He began to compress and squeeze the ball of fire until it was the size of his head instead of the size of his body. After grabbing the ball, Naruto threw it at the soldiers, shouting, Hito. Rairashi Bakuhatsu. Fire Art. Gallant Detonation. Because of its increased size and the fact that it was aiming for the wide space between the soldiers, The soldiers were less frightened by the projectile than they had been previously. "Get him while he's still in the air," Wong commanded, launching himself into a fierce firestorm. However, the red ball struck the ground before he or any of the others could fire. Along with his 4 fellow soldiers, a soldier was blasted into a wall and rendered unconscious. Panting heavily, Azula stood over her fallen foes. She was this exhausted after fighting 12 men who weren't master level in less than an hour. Regaining her peak fighting form was her top priority once she left this place. Boom! Not far away, the princess turned and saw a burst of red flames. Xiao Zhu looked out at the vast mass of red flames that was rising. What in the world? Red fire? Azula's eyes grew wide. Uzumaki, he's still here? It's the princess. Azula turned to face the 3 soldiers who were rushing toward her. One of them was caught by a blast she kicked back, and she fled. What kept Naruto here? How could he have caused such a massive explosion? What impact would this have on her escape? Naruto gazed at the devastation before him. There was a big shallow crater, the street was burning, and buildings were on fire. Maybe a B-rank move like that was too much. Slightly burned, unconscious soldiers were strewn about it. Whoops. He heard Kyuubi exhale what sounded almost like a sigh of satisfaction. Oh, now that's more like it, crushing your enemies with overwhelming force, and using my flames to do it. Oh, please stop talking. I only did that because I was called Pipsqueak by those jerks. I'm not short. Kyuubi retorted cynically, yeah, it's just that everyone else is really tall. Yes, that's, fuck you, you fucking jerk. Naruto disconnected the call. Somehow, he still needed to locate Azula and stop her. A voice asked, what do you think happened? A group of soldiers turned the corner just as Naruto vanished from view. They went around and began using their bending to put out the fires. Man, what a mess. The men were lying on the ground when one soldier noticed them. He looked for pulses and said, hey look, they're alive. The others approached. It's Colonel Wong and his squad. Is this the princess's doing? I don't know. That explosion wasn't blue. Yeah, and I heard Wong was chasing some boy. Boy? You mean the one from last night? He's still in town? A man moaned. The others moaned in agreement. Great. That means we're going to have to kill him too alongside the princess. Man, what a pain. What do you mean kill alongside the princess? When the soldiers turned around, they saw Naruto standing there, his face expressionless. Azula leapt over a fence, which was subsequently demolished as soldiers hurried through the debris. Fire, barrels, crates, people, and falling debris from walls and buildings she had blasted were all things she used to slow them down. In front of her, 2 firebenders emerged and let loose streams of flames. She slid beneath the flames, appeared between the 2, and stabbed them with 2 fire daggers before running on. Civilians fled as more fire was thrown at her. Azula followed them as they ran, moving farther into the crowd before scuttling away and going inside a building. There were 2 other people inside the clothes store. One of them, a stout woman, rushed to her and grinned broadly. Welcome. How may I help you? Pushing her aside, Azula hurried into the back room and out the back door leading to an alley. Move it. Surprisingly, she came out at the warehouse district after sprinting down the lengthy, winding alleyway. Knowing that the fastest way out of town would be to cross through here, Azula frowned and continued on, having previously studied the layout of the town. Before she could even take 3 steps, a burst of flames blocked her journey. Azula looked toward the fireblast's origin. The teenager spat venomously, Xiao Zhu. With a platoon of soldiers standing behind him, Xiao Zhu smiled arrogantly. It's ironic, the place where we started our partnership is where it's going to end. Azula shifted into a defensive position and began to slowly move away from him. Xiao Zhu gave a disapproving finger wave. He whistled, and soldiers emerged from behind the crates and buildings. Azula looked around and quickly turned her back to the warehouse wall to her left, which was the only area free of soldiers. It's doubtful that you plan on just capturing me now that I've discovered your true intentions. Xiao Zhu grinned broadly. The general laughed when Azula growled, it seems insanity hasn't dulled that sharp mind of yours. He swatted the man to the ground, and she fired twin orange fire shots at him. He laughed and remarked, but it has apparently dulled your firebending. As though betrayed, Azula gazed at her hands. Why was she losing everything she had? Her mother, friends, country, throne, and soon to be her life's flames. With tears of rage streaming down her cheeks, Azula fell to the ground and went to her knees, defeated. Giving up? That's good, you recognize you have no chance. When I tell your brother the story of how we were unable to capture you alive, well, I doubt he'll be too disappointed. Though the boss isn't going to be too happy that Plan A didn't work out, but I'm sure he'll understand, given the circumstances. Many others followed him into a firebending stance. Goodbye, princess. Azula raised her gaze. Despite her defeat, she maintained her honor and refused to give up, choosing to face her death with her head held high. They let loose streams of flames that merged into a single, massive fire wave. Abruptly, a burst of red fire erupted from the sky, engulfing the wave in a massive wall of flames. As everyone gaped at the scene in disbelief, the soldiers were forced back by the clash of flames. The fire subsided sufficiently for the intruder to be recognized. "You," shouted Xiao Zhu. The individual in front of her shocked Azula even more, Uzumaki. Without a word, he stood with his back to her. Xiao Zhu smiled. "Well, I must thank you for coming here yourself and saving us the trouble of finding you." Naruto remained silent. Azula got to her feet. Without turning to face her, Naruto asked, "Why are you still here? I tried to have you killed. You should be long gone." To everyone's surprise, Naruto remained unconscious for a brief moment before leaping back and flooring her with an elbow to the top of her head. Azula got to her feet, clutching her aching head while glaring at Naruto. What the hell was that for? Without turning to face her, he remarked, "That was for trying to kill me. For that you elbowed me. You could have just left me to die. Why did you save me?" "Didn't I already tell you, even if they are jerks, I don't turn my back on my friends." Azula turned her head away as her eyes widened and then narrowed. "You're a fool." Xiao Zhu said, "Yes, I must agree with the young lady on that. And I must say that you're a lying bastard, Mr. General, of the Black Fire Order." For a moment, Xiao Zhu's eyes widened. "So you know?" "Yeah, I had to beat it out of some of your men." He started another fire, and his men followed with their own blasts, starting another wave of fire. "Well, now I really can't let you leave you alive." He grinned as he observed the teens being swept away by the fire. "Block this boy," he said. However, it died, leaving only 2 burning crates when the fire subsided. How could... They ran off. He was unaware. Spread out and... A shuriken sliced Xiao Zhu's cheek as it flew past his head from behind. "Find," he said, gazing at the weapon embedded in the earth. He turned to see where the shuriken had come from and discovered them on the roof of another warehouse. Them. Azula felt lightheaded, disoriented, and a little queasy. She had no idea what Uzumaki was doing or how he did it, but she was staring at a lot of fire while she felt like she was being pulled through a tube at such a high speed that she was unable to see her surroundings and ended up sitting on this roof. Just as the Black Fire soldiers realized they were no longer there and the flames from the attack had cleared, the firebending prodigy had glanced down. Azula believed they had made a clean escape, but then she saw that Naruto had thrown a shuriken at Xiao Zhu that nicked him with a fair amount of accuracy. "Idiot! What did you do that for? We could have gotten away unnoticed." Naruto slipped off his cloak and dropped his backpack, saying, "I wasn't trying to get away." He took a step forward and gestured to the soldiers below. "I'm taking you down." Xiao Zhu chuckled. When the soldiers realized that Xiao Zhu was telling the truth, they became alert. "Is that right? I saw what you used to block our attack. Rose flames." Some people burst out laughing. Azula considered running, but she knew she couldn't go very far by herself. Her only hope of escape was Naruto, but the boy was adamant about fighting and risking his life. Naruto let out a moan. "Stop calling them that. First of all, it's a stupid name. It sounds like a title you got stuck with because no one could come up with something that sounded better, one. And second, they're not even rose flames, or red and orange. My flames have no orange in them. So they're pure red. No, they're red and black." Xiao Zhu's smile faded. Azula jerked her head in Naruto's direction. The soldiers' laughter ceased. Azula kept staring at Naruto's unreadable face as there was a pause before the soldiers burst out laughing. He said black fire. Slipping into a horse stance, Naruto did so. Did he really just say that? His arms were crossed in front of him. What a joke. He took a deep breath. Black fire, huh? Shut the hell up. Naruto yelled as he uncrossed his arms, causing fire to shoot out of his body and spiral into the sky as a huge, clearly red and black pillar of flame. The soldiers ceased to laugh, and it was unlikely that they would do so again. Xiao Zhu stared in awe at the fire tower. Impossible. Black fire is a myth. That's why we call ourselves the Black Fire Order, because to the people we're just a myth. Azula had to back off a few paces because she was so close. No, how come there is so much fire? This is unlike anything I've seen since the day of the comet. At the edge of the grounds, the wounded Colonel Wong leaned against a wall and gazed in wonder at the flames. Black tinged red fire. Black is the fire that's supposed to be even hotter than white fire, the flames of hell. Only Naruto's hand ignited as the flames dwindled. He grinned ominously and said, You see, I don't have rose flame, I have hellfire. Some of the soldiers even retreated a step as they gave him a terrified look. The men turned to their general, who was clapping and laughing, and said, "Hee. What a marvelous demonstration. Color me impressed." Naruto remarked, "You sure don't sound it." He made a point, and the men calmed down. "Oh, but I am. I'm just not worried. You see, your hellfire, while impressive, doesn't change the fact that you're just one boy and we're an entire company of men. Or do you really think your hellfire is enough all of us?" Naruto slowly put out his flame while glancing at all the soldiers present. "Yeah, I don't think I can take you all with just my firebending." Xiaozu grinned. "I guess I'll use windbending, it is my best element." Azula blinked. "What? Kazeto, Daitopa, wind art. Great breakthrough." Naruto threw his palms forward and let loose a blast of red wind that sent a fourth of the soldiers flying and ripped through the grounds. Standing a few feet from the blast's path, stunned, Xiaozu's jaw dropped and his smirk was snatched away forever. Huh. As Azula saw the scene, her eyes widened uncontrollably. That was airbending. She was still trying to comprehend that the boy next to her had simply airbended, and the question of why it was red lingered in the back of her mind. Naruto gave her an odd look. He made a clone and said, "Airbending? No, that was windbending." His final words were harsher. "Stay with Haim Chan. I'm about to go wild, so keep her safe and keep her here." He got a thumbs up from the clone. "Gotcha, boss. Show them the power of the Konoha no Shinku avatar." The eyes of all widened even more. They understood the last part of the title, but not the majority of it. Avatar? Naruto's hands were encircled by miniature red tornadoes as he descended toward the soldiers. He was hit by fireball after fireball, but he managed to swerve through the conflagration and get past a line of soldiers to land a blow to Xiaozu's face. He slammed his fist into Xiaozu's face, sending the general flying. One of the soldiers yelled, "General," as he crashed through a warehouse roof. He was surrounded by soldiers, including higher-ranking officers. With a growl, the older lieutenant general said, "You'll pay for that, boy." Naruto's mouth curving into a smirk was their only warning before he began spinning quickly and conjuring a tornado that sucked them and any nearby soldiers into the air. Still too stunned to move, Azula sat and watched in silence as the men were thrown into the air. Azula saw something flying off of them as they did. Blood? How? Azula turned to the clone and asked, with windbending. Innocently, the clone said, "You don't know?" Azula arched an eyebrow and said, "Water smashes, earth crushes, fire burns, and wind cuts." He waved his hand dismissively and said, "It's a saying we have about the four elements. There's another version that states water chills, but that sounds lame." Azula looked down at the original Naruto as he charged at three men who threw streams of fire at the boy, asking, "Wind cuts?" He landed behind the soldiers after leaping over the explosions. Before they could completely turn around, Naruto slashed at one with his arm from a distance of several feet, causing blood to spray from the man's back as he fell forward. Naruto rolled aside as one of his partners swung a fire whip at him, then stabbed forward with his arm, sending a thin stream of red wind that sliced into his shoulder. A gust of wind blasted the man back as he painfully grasped his bleeding shoulder. The final man struck Naruto with a fireball. Naruto cut the man in the stomach by slicing through it and swiping horizontally. The clone smiled. "It's the most offensive type of bending. I mean, how can you block something you can't even touch?" Azula scowled as she saw Naruto spit out a tornado that tore through a line of soldiers. She didn't really say, "I see." She has previously battled an airbender, the fucking avatar, for Agni's sake, and has repeatedly stopped him from airbending, even with her bare hands. What was he referring to as offensive type bending, considering airbending as purely defensive? Additionally, she gave the clone a suspicious look and said, "How is it that you can bend both fire and air? Only the avatar can bend more than one element." He gave her a blank blink in return. "Well, you kind of just answered your own question." Azula took hold of his shirt and drew him in. "Don't play with me, I've battled the avatar several times so I know you're not him." "Duh. Remember? I'm from the future. The guy you fought would be one of my past lives." The princess flashed him a sardonic glance. "Seriously?" He gave her a scowl. "How else do you explain two avatars?" Two avatars could not be explained. However, there was no other explanation for his ability to bend two elements. "Is he really laughing?" she asked, turning back to the original Naruto who was tearing through the soldiers. In stark contrast to the reluctant, pacifist avatar who fled more often than he fought, he was having a great time beating on these soldiers. Naruto kicked a blast of air that struck a man in the face after slamming two men's heads together and leaping over them. A group of soldiers were knocked back by a wind wave caused by a spin kick. This is great. I haven't kicked so much ass at once since that bandit camp last year, Naruto chuckled. Several firebenders took advantage of his leap over a burst of flames and opened fire on him. To their astonishment, however, Naruto kicked the air, back, flipped even higher to dodge the shots, and skidded to a halt in midair while crouching as though he were on solid ground. He can fly? Naruto looked around at the other men. He spat out a stream of tiny wind bullets that rained down on the soldiers, saying, "There are still like 30 of them." Kazeto. Pareto Bufu, Wind Art. Pellet Storm. He flew over them to assess the damage. About 10 of them were still standing, one of them a roughed up Xiaozu with a swollen face and bloody nose. In front of Azula and his clone, Naruto appeared to float. He cracked his knuckles and glared down at the soldiers. "There's a clinic on the other side of town. When you land there and they ask what happened to you, tell them you pissed off the Crimson Avatar." The soldiers swallowed. A black spiral could be seen in each of Naruto's eyes as his tattoos and eyes glowed. Around him, a fierce red wind started to gather. He threw both of his arms forward, directing all of the wind into a strong torrent that resembled a dragon and hurled it at the soldiers, saying, "Kazdo, Tatsu Shippuha, Wind Art, Dragon Hurricane Blast." When they saw the wind dragon, they screamed and attempted to flee, but they were caught up, sliced, and launched into the air. With his hands hooked behind his head and a broad smile on his face, Naruto landed in front of Azula and his clone. "Did you see that? I just spanked an entire army of firebenders. They couldn't even touch me?" The clone leapt to his feet, grinning just as broadly. "That's right, we're awesome." "Hell yeah!" they exclaimed as they gave each other high fives and burst out laughing. After slowly getting to her feet, Azula decided that today was the most bizarre day of her life as she looked at the two laughing impersonators. But when Azula reflected on this day later, she would say it was rather humorous. The clone abruptly stopped laughing, a horrified expression on his face as the two laughed some more. "What's wrong?" inquired Naruto. Behind Naruto, the clone gestured. Naruto's face returned to its horrified state as he turned around. Azula's eyes widened slightly as she stared at what they were observing. In addition to sending those soldiers hurtling through the air, that last attack had left the city in ruins. Walls were now rubble, buildings were ripped apart, and fires had been started in some way. All of his earlier attacks had also left the surrounding area in ruins. Azula said, "Wow. When you go wild all over the place." Naruto let out a moan. "Not again. This happens every time I go into the Avatar state in a populated area." "Well, why don't you stop using it in populated areas if this happens every time?" Azula appeared to have just said something brilliant to Naruto and the clone. She screamed at them, "You couldn't come to that conclusion on your own." She gave her temple a rub. "Oh Agni, I'm getting a migraine. You're actually giving me a migraine." Turning, Naruto looked at his Bunshin. "You think they'll let us get away with this when we tell them we stopped a rebel group?" One warehouse abruptly fell to the side, colliding with another, which in turn fell and struck another, which in turn struck still another, and so on, until it reached the last row. He vanished in a cloud of smoke after saying, "No, I don't think so. I'm going to go now, bye." To Azula's surprise and annoyance, Naruto rushed over, gathered his belongings, scooped her up bridal style, and took off. "Let's get out of here." Naruto sat on a boulder and gazed into the distance a few miles later on a hill north of Wangjinhuo. Azula sat leaning against a tree behind him, gazing intently at the young avatar. It had been a few minutes since they had sat quietly. The silence was finally broken by Azula. "So you're really from the future, an avatar from the future?" "Yep. And you're an evil princess from a family of evil warlords who have been terrorizing the world for 100 years. She gave him a fierce look. "We're not evil. The Fire Nation is the greatest nation in the world and it's only right that our empire is spread across the world." Naruto gave her a disbelieving glance. "Being the greatest doesn't give you the right to conquer the world." Azula pretended to be upset. "The Avatar disapproves of our ideals. What a surprise." Naruto said to her, What are? There's no R, it's just you." Azula had nothing to say in response. Azula put her head on her knees and drew his legs in, saying, "You're right, there's nobody on my side now. Everyone either betrays me or leaves me behind. I have no family, no friends, no allies." Naruto looked at Azula below. Her eyes, which I don't know why I didn't notice yesterday, are similar to mine in that they seek the means to establish your existence and are aware of loneliness and hatred. No, they have a gloominess about them that wasn't there the day before, much like Haku's did before he passed away. She's given up. "So I guess you're going to capture me and turn me into my brother?" Naruto snapped out of his reverie and blinked. What makes you say that? Azula bitterly acknowledged, it seems like the biggest trend lately is people turning against me. Naruto asked, so you're just giving up? Azula turned away with a sneer. If my father couldn't beat a fully realized avatar while he was powered by the comet, what chance do I have against one with my firebending weakened? Negatively, Naruto shook his head. I'm not a fully realized avatar. Unexpected to hear that news, Azula turned to face him. Yeah, the only element I mastered is wind. I've almost mastered fire, I'm decent in energy, just barely know the basics of water, and I don't know earth at all, he stated. Even so, Azula could tell he was telling the truth. There are several things wrong with that sentence. First off, you can use hellfire but you're not a master. When I was able to use blue fire I was immediately made a master. My flames started out as hellfire, so that rule wouldn't apply to me. That's impossible. No one's flames can start out like that. He sat down against a tree across from her and said, for certain people it's possible. Yugi. Chan's fire started out as blue. Tinted hellfire and Roshi. Sensei has always had his magma flames. Magma flames. What are? Never mind. Next thing. Your skill set doesn't make any sense. The avatar is supposed to learn the elements in a specific order. Water, earth, fire, and air. Naruto leapt off the boulder and said, and you're wondering why I haven't followed that order. It's because doing so would have been inconvenient. You see, in my time not a lot of people know what bending is, and since they don't know what it is, they don't look to see if they can bend. Thus a lot of people go their entire lives not knowing that they are benders. So there aren't a lot, 10,000 maybe, if even that, who both knows how and are able to bend, and few are masters, and fewer of them are willing to teach others. Azula sat motionless in disbelief. She couldn't believe that there would only be a few thousand benders in the future. In the Fire Nation alone, there were over 1 million benders. Unaware of the Fire Teen's stunned expression, Naruto continued. If I found a master who didn't mind teaching me, I stuck with them. That's why I went from wind, to fire, to water, to earth instead of the order I was supposed to go. Wind, water, earth, and fire. You're an air nomad. A what? He scowled thoughtfully before beaming with insight. Oh. No, I'm from the elemental nations. Azula deadpanned, that's the entire world, idiot. Naruto deadpanned back, no, that's just a continent, genius. Things are different 500 years from now. For example, the world is no longer made up of just 4 countries. There's still the Fire Nation, right? Naruto gave his cheek a scratch. There's the Land of Fire, Hai no Kuni. It's one of the 5 great shinobi countries of the elemental nations and the country where I was born. Azula was dizzy. I have one last question. What did you mean by energy? Energy bending, was the blonde's straightforward response. And that is? Inquired Azula, who had never heard of the art form that eliminated her father's bending. He lifted his right hand, which had begun to glow light, blue, and thrust it forward, sending a light, blue rope of energy flying out and encircling Azula's torso. The ability to bend energy, like this. Gazing down at the binding in disbelief, Azula strained against it, but the rope remained in place. Naruto said, time to get moving, and turned to leave. He yanked the other end of the rope, which was still in his hand, and dragged the princess after him, saying, come along Chan. Azula scowled at the boy as she staggered to her feet. She said sourly, so you are turning me in? Nope. Azula gave him a suspicious narrow of the eyes. He smiled at her as he turned around. You still have one friend, and he'll always be on your side, Dabbeo. That she didn't anticipate. She wasn't going to fully trust him even though, once more, he wasn't lying. Nevertheless, there was a glimmer of hope. So you're offering to help me get my crown back? Hell no. Azula made a face fault. She leapt to her feet and confronted Naruto. She yelled, I thought you were on my side. He gave her a blank stare. I am on your side, but friends don't let friends become evil tyrants. She twitched her eye. Naruto turned away from the irate girl, making her even more irritated while concealing the troubled expression on his face. So you're going to stick with me until you realize that being one is wrong and you don't want to do it anymore. However, how can I persuade her of that? Naruto moaned and turned to face north. Oni. Baba has said that I have a gift for changing people's outlook on life, but I never tried to do that, it just sort of happened. We have a lot of ground to cover and not a lot of time to do it. She said, what? Where are you going? I need to meet up with my master. He came here with me but I guess we got separated when we first arrived. It won't be long before he'll get bored of wherever he's at and start looking for me. But I can't move as fast as I wanted to or draw attention to myself because of you. He looked at Azula and then walked away. Naruto turned to face the front and rolled his eyes. Oh, yes. This is entertaining. Azula complained as the young blonde, still bound with the energy rope, guided her through a forest. Naruto stopped as they entered a tiny clearing. He nodded to himself after taking a quick look around. Naruto turned to face Azula and said, "Yeah, this place should work. We'll sleep here tonight." Azula scowled. "You want to stop here, out in the open, when the better smarter thing to do would be to find a cave or something?" Azula asked him, "There are no caves around here. Besides Chan, why would you want to stay in a cave when you could sleep in a nice house?" He grinned and proceeded through a series of hand seals before reaching the snake seal. Mokuton. Shichuka no Jutsu. Wood release. 4 pillars house technique. Astonished, the Fire Princess watched as a building's worth of wood exploded from the earth. However, a sense of underwhelming took the place of that surprise. "Is that your definition of a nice house?" Naruto blushed, and his eye twitched. The house before them was a terrible sight. One half of the house was more than 2 stories tall, while the other half was only about 1. In addition, there were numerous holes in the walls and the wood didn't fit together precisely. In addition, there were leafy branches growing outside the house. Azula remarked, "There isn't even a door." Naruto screamed at her, "Shut up! Do you know how hard it is to grow a house? I'd like to see you try." Azula averted her gaze and rolled her eyes. Naruto gave her a brief glance before shrugging and letting go of the technique, the rope disappearing into thin air. "Whatever. Just untie me now." Azula turned and walked in the direction of the house. To her annoyance, she ignited a blue fireball above her palm, which turned orange instantly. Naruto questioned, "What are you doing?" She declared, "I'm going to make a door. And burn down the house in the process." Azula laughed. She reared her hand back and said, "Oh please. I can stop the fire from spreading that much." Snuffing out the flame, Naruto took hold of her wrist and put his hand over hers. "I also don't want a big ass hole in the wall." Azula said, "Well then, how do you suggest we get in?" After drawing a kunai, Naruto began to spin it by its ring. He repeatedly slashed at the wall, kicked the cut portion down, and then walked through the square hole, saying, "I'll cut out a door using windbending." Azula gave a headshake. "Oh, but you don't want me to make a hole." Naruto looked around and either didn't hear her or ignored her. He saw multiple bedroom doors and remarked, "Well, at least I made doors in here." Naruto's eye twitched and he turned to face Azula, who was looking around, saying, "You shouldn't have made it so big. There are only 2 of us, there's no need for it to be this big." Naruto gave her a sardonic glance. He suspected she would have complained about the house being too small if he had reduced its size. Azula turned to face Naruto and asked him a question that had been on her mind all day. "So, Uzumaki, seeing as how I'm stuck with you, for the time being, I think I deserve to know what your plans are. Seriously, what reason would the Avatar have to travel back 500 years in the past?" After a moment of blank blinking, Naruto snapped his fingers. He said, "That's right, I was going to ask you before but with all of the lying and backstabbing I forgot. You're a princess. If there was a person or people causing disorder or big trouble you would have heard about it, right?" "Causing disorder or big trouble? You mean rebels?" Naruto gave a headshake. "No more like people who are causing enough trouble to disrupt the balance of the world." Azula stared at him incredulously and asked, "The balance of the world? You do remember the world has been at war for the last century? That could be anybody?" "Damn. You're right. I guess that's not what they're doing then. How am I going to find them then?" "Find who?" inquired Azula. "Well, apparently there are other people from my time who traveled here and their presence is causing an imbalance in the time-space continuum or something, and the spirits decided that since they're from my time and my homeland that it's my duty to bring them back instead of the current avatar, who is already here and should be fixing the imbalances of his own time, or Koan's, the one who let them come here in the first place." Naruto was furious. He yelled at the sky, "He can do it easily, he's the freaking spirit of time for crying out loud. Sometimes I really hate spirits. Most of them are demanding and selfish. They do things or demand stuff for their own benefit without any regard for what it'll cost us because we're just lowly humans, or foolish mortals." Azula had heard that the Avatar was an ally of the spirits, so she was a little taken aback when he said that. The princess said, "Well, that sounds like a big pain. Are they here in the Fire Nation?" "I don't know." Azula let out a frustrated sigh. "Why are they here? You can probably start your search based off that." Naruto gave a nod. "Yeah, except I don't know why they're here." Azula said, "Of course you don't. Well, who are they? That can give you a clue." "I don't know. What do they look like? I don't know. How many are there? I don't know." Azula said, "You don't even know that. Do you know anything about your targets?" I know at least one of them is an earthbending master. Azula gazed at him incredulously. That's it? And you're planning on dragging me with you on this wild turkey goose chase? How do you plan on finding these people only knowing that? Before shaking his head, Naruto gave her a strange look. Oh, shut up, I'll figure something out. And I turkey, goose? He said. Anyway, believe me, I didn't want to involve any more people than I had to, but in good conscience I can't let someone who wants to, and can, start a world war just roam around. If you just find a better goal in life, you won't have to hang around me anymore. Azula gave a snort. The thought was almost alluring. Naruto let out a yawn. He entered one of the rooms and said, "Are we done talking, because I haven't slept since yesterday and I'm going to bed now. Good night." In addition to the fact that they had been walking all day, Azula realized she hadn't slept since yesterday as she watched him close the door. Azula scowled as she entered one of the rooms and found it to be empty. She called out to the young ninja, "Am I supposed to sleep on the floor?" before his door opened in a roll. Up sleeping bag flew out, landing at her feet. There was a brief period of silence. With a sigh, Azula picked up the bag and went into her room. The following morning, Azula, like all firebenders, rose with the sun. She stretched and made the decision to train, something she hadn't done in months. Feeling rejuvenated, she went outside to bask in the sun's rays. After taking a deep breath, Azula ran through a few katas and settled into a firebending stance. Even though her movements were slower than they were a few months ago, she completed the first two flawlessly. She made a mistake when she landed incorrectly and fell during the third kata, which required a jumping kick. She complained as she stood up and ran through it once more, this time getting it exactly right. She completed additional sets, each more difficult than the last, before making a mistake during a double spin. Before she managed to complete the same sequence without falling, she made 5 more attempts, but Azula wasn't happy. Being the meticulous person that she was, she scowled at her hand because she had let out an arc of fire too low. Azula couldn't decide which was more annoying. The fact that she was making mistakes with moves she had learned when she was 10 years old, or the fact that her blue fire was turning orange almost immediately. Azula turned to Naruto, who was sitting against the house, laughing as he poured water into 2 large cups. "I'm guessing you're more of a technique user, right?" Azula asked. She inquired, "What do you mean by technique user?" As Azula's face flushed and she gave him a fierce look, Naruto laughed and said, "Well, judging by your performance there, I think it's safe to say you're not much of a form-type bender." Azula gave him a bewildered look. "What are you talking about, technique user and form-type?" Naruto blinked. He took hold of the cups and exhaled deeply, the water beginning to steam. "You don't know? There are 2 ways bending is used. Through form or technique. Form style is bending that is executed with taijutsu." Taijutsu? Naruto sighed as he translated, hand.to. Hand combat, martial arts, whatever. And technique style is bending that is executed with simple psychical movement and great manipulation of energy, sort like jutsu. Most people tend to be better at one than the other. Form-type benders are more close.to. Mid-range fighters and are in better physical condition, while technique types are more mid.to. Long-range fighters and have better kai control. Really skilled technique types can bend without any movement. They're the ones who end up mastering their element the fastest. At that, Azula's eyes grew wide. "Are you saying that they can bend with just their thoughts?" Naruto gave a nod. Once again, Naruto nodded. "Like actual attacks? That's impossible." "It is too possible." Naruto countered him. Azula laughed, "Yeah, right." Naruto gave her a scowl before grinning. An unexpected gust of wind knocked Azula down, and before she could reach the ground, she was landed on a tiny tornado that lifted her a few inches off the ground and sent her skyward, where she was held aloft by wind swirling around her body. Azula flipped upside down as she frantically flailed her arms and legs in a panic. After a moment of simply floating there upside down, Azula's panic turned to irritation, and her ire grew as she heard Naruto laughing. Azula had screamed, expecting to start falling. "You have a surprisingly cute scream." The boy hadn't moved an inch, so she looked up, or down. He said, "Told you it was possible. Controlling and manipulating energy like kai or chakra is mostly mental work." Naruto stated to her. As he put it, plus the more you use a technique, the easier it becomes to use until it becomes as easy as breathing. At least that's what I've been told. I'm not at that level yet. In reality, it took all of his focus to perform this small stunt. Despite being a master, his kai control wasn't too good. Gritting her teeth, she said, "Fine, it's possible. Now put me down now." She landed on her feet after bouncing off a bubble of air as the wind that was swirling around her stopped. Azula regained her senses and gave Naruto a smoldering glare. He swallowed uneasily and stopped grinning. Azula gave an angry growl and said, "Don't do that again." Naruto gave a quick nod. Alright, Haim, Chan. The boy started to perspire as she gazed down at him. What is it, Haim? Sama. So what type are you? Naruto exhaled inwardly, relieved that she wouldn't harm him. I'm a form type, he declared with pride. Technique types may be better the benders, but we're the better fighters. Unable to comprehend that fact, Azula questioned, wait, how is that possible? She sighed as Naruto shrugged. She made the decision to move on to another topic about which she had been interested. So red airbending. I've never heard of that before, but that could be because I've only met one other airbender before. Oh, that? You know how fire changes color based on its temperature? Azula gave a nod. It's sort of the same thing with wind. There was an incident when I was born that ended up with me gaining, among other things, really powerful bending, even for an avatar. It was hard for me to control, and it took me months to get it down to a level where I could safely bend in public. The wind I generate is strong and fast enough to catch friction and heat up, and that's where the color comes from. Naruto grinned sheepishly. The first time I used red wind, it was an accident during a fight where I was getting my ass kicked. He smiled as he glanced at the cups. He raised one of the cups and said, "Ramen time." Azula accepted it. She raised an eyebrow as she looked into the cup. Noodle soup for breakfast. With chopsticks inches from his lips, Naruto paused and silently mouthed, "Noodle soup." He said the words, "Noodle soup." Incredulously, "Did you just call ramen noodle soup? What are you, retarded?" She pointed to some noodles and asked, "Are you saying this isn't noodle soup?" Noodle soup wishes it could be ramen. Ramen is the food of the gods. A gift bestowed to us mortals by Kami. Sama himself. The brunette shrieked. He thrust a furious finger into her face. And not only do complain about it, you actually called it noodle soup. Azula slapped his hand away from her face as her eye twitched. To be honest, her uncle didn't take tea nearly as seriously as this. Oh, shut up. She discovered that, although Azula didn't feel like telling Naruto about it at the moment, her ramen did taste a little better than noodle soup. She was eating when she suddenly remembered something Naruto had said. When you described the way form types fight, you used the word mainly. You also used mainly for the way technique types fight. Why? Naruto took a gulp of his noodles. Well, form style bending is great, but it's good to have some ranged attacks too, and there aren't a lot of close range B rank or A rank techniques, and the few that exist usually have some kind of risk to the body. A rank and B rank methods? Azula pondered. Like I said, we form types prefer close range combat, but eventually we learn techniques to get higher level attacks and to be able to fight at a distance, and even though technique types train to bend by just manipulating their energy mentally, the use of physical movement increases the speed, power, and control of their bending, plus they work on their physical abilities just in case the fight is brought up close, if only the level of just being able to defend themselves long enough to get some distance. Master level benders are usually proficient in both areas of combat. Azula gave a nod. It made sense. As a master of firebending, Azula was competent at both close and far range fighting, but she couldn't say that she could attack anyone with sheer willpower. She thought to herself, so I guess that means I'm more of a form type. So since you're an airbending master, that means you know some A-rank techniques, right? Naruto replied, "Windbending master, and yes I do. How about in firebending, do you know any A-ranks there?" Replied Azula. As he finished his ramen, Naruto nodded. With a kind of seductive smile, Azula leaned closer to him. "You wouldn't mind showing me, would you?" she inquired. There was no question that these A-rank methods were the best available. She assumed that she was familiar with almost all of them, but since Naruto was from the future, it's likely that he was familiar with some moves that haven't even been created yet, moves that she could incorporate into her own skill set. Naruto scowled. Because Azula was grinning at him, he felt uneasy and was discouraged from showing her his best moves, despite his inner showman wanting to do so. "What, don't you know any? I heard you're supposed to be some kind of prodigy who mastered firebending really young." Azula grinned smugly. "Yes, that is true, but I want to see what you're capable of, firebending-wise. You said you haven't mastered firebending yet, and I am a firebending master. Maybe I can give you some helpful pointers." She was lying. Naruto scowled thoughtfully. She was right, but he thought she wasn't being completely truthful, and her previous performance didn't seem like a master's. Naruto sighed after considering it for a moment more. "I'm going to have to find a more open space. I don't want to burn the forest down." Naruto stood on a ledge with a view of a nearby running stream and a sizable rocky flatland. "This will work." Azula put one hand on her hip behind him and waved the other impatiently. "Whatever, just get on with it." Naruto growled in frustration, his eye twitching, but he refrained from responding. He told her, "You might want to scoot back some." Rolling her eyes, Azula retreated 2 paces. Naruto spread his feet wide, closed his eyes, and inhaled deeply before opening them. He clasped his hands above his head and exclaimed, "Hito! Hurameki Inferno, Flash Inferno!" A huge explosion of fire erupted around him, forcing Azula to cover her eyes and retreat farther back. The area below was engulfed in a sea of flame as he thrust his clasped hands forward, sending the flames all shooting into the flatland. Before he spoke aloud, Naruto reflected, "I should have considered this, that's going to be a pain to put out." He turned to face Azula, expecting to give her a snobbish remark, but he stopped when he saw the stunned expression on the older girl's face. "You better be satisfied with that because I'm not doing another one." A grin appeared on his face. And all of a sudden, it was worthwhile. Azula stared at the enormous conflagration before her. It was unbelievable what she had just seen. She had studied firebending from the best instructors in the field, learned it from her father, who was the world's most powerful firebender until recently, met the most powerful firebenders, and learned everything there was to know about it. She had never seen or heard of a single firebender producing so much fire, unless it happened once. The comet's arrival. Her eyes shifted from the fire to Naruto when he laughed. With his head thrown back and his chest puffed out, Naruto was laughing triumphantly as he faced her. "Ha ha ha ha. That's right. I'm awesome, go on and admit it." Azula scoffed, averting her gaze and crossing her arms beneath her chest. "Yeah right." Naruto mimicked her earlier expression, saying, "Oh, don't try to deny that you weren't amazed. This is the face of someone who saw something incredible." Azula sneered after blushing slightly. "Don't flatter yourself. Yes, the size of that was startling at first, but after realizing you enhanced it with your avatar state, it's not very impressive." "I didn't use any avatar state," yelled Naruto angrily. "When I go into the avatar state, my eyes and all of my markings glow. That was just a normal Hurameki Inferno." Gazing back at the raging fire, which had significantly diminished in size due to Naruto's creation of clones to extinguish it, Azula said somewhat shakily, "Normal huh?" Naruto looked at her oddly and nodded. "Are you really a firebending master?" Azula jerked her head in his direction. "Excuse me? I've been a master for almost 3 years now. I happen to be one of the most powerful firebenders in world, possibly the most powerful now that my father can no longer bend." "But you thought my Hurameki Inferno was enhanced. A master would have known that was a normal A-rank level technique." Naruto replied. "And that look on your face after you saw it, I thought it was because you didn't think I was able to use an A-rank technique, but you were actually more surprised by the technique, not me. It was like you've never seen a technique of that level before." Azula cursed in her mind for making herself so readable. "I have seen firebending on that level before," she said. In her mind, she acknowledged, but it was during a time when firebending was enhanced almost 100-fold. Naruto gave a shrug. He looked at her smugly after saying, "Okay, but can you bend at that level?" Azula laughed. "Once more, it happened during the comet. If I put my mind to it, I've bent flames bigger than that." She growled as Naruto, still sporting that grating smug smile, challenged, "Well, go on right ahead then." She said, "I don't have to prove myself to the likes of you," and turned to leave. Naruto laughed as he saw her leave. Before leaping down to join his clones in extinguishing the fire, he remarked, "That was fun. Say bye to the house." Azula looked at the time traveler icily and then at the house. She fired a blast of fire into a wall and said, "Bye." Naruto exclaimed, "Hey," as he extinguished the fire. Azula noticed, dimly, that his wind was not as red as it had been the night before. "I want this house to stay, you know, for the people who find themselves having to stay out here overnight, they can stay here and not outside." Before setting the house on fire once more, Azula remarked, "If that's the case, then I'm doing those people a favor by burning down this monstrosity." Azula stopped Naruto before he could extinguish the flames. "Did you forget that I'm a fugitive? I don't want to leave behind any trace of myself." Naruto let out a dejected sigh. With a wave of his arm, a dome of red wind rose up and engulfed the house before subsiding a moment later. "Okay. But there are better ways of getting rid of the house than potentially starting a forest fire." With her hands shielding her from the dust, Azula lowered them and gave Naruto a fierce look. "Warn me before you do something like that." Naruto gave a sheepish smile. "Sorry." Azula sneered and took a sharp breath as she glanced over at the house, expecting to see the roof blown off at worst. The house had vanished, leaving behind nothing but a heap of sawdust and wood chips. Azula went somewhat pale. With a single wave of his gulp, he had just destroyed the house. She knew that airbending was a style without any deadly techniques, but that wind dome was certainly deadly. Given how unique it was, perhaps that's why he called it windbending. Even though it wasn't as large and strong as that weaker A-rank technique, Naruto was able to use it with such ease and casualness. He acknowledged that the only bending technique he was proficient in was wind. That, I suppose, merely demonstrates the disparity in skill between his firebending and windbending. Naruto said as he turned to leave, "Let's go, Chan. We still have a long way to go." Azula followed him in silence, still in a daze. A few hours later, Naruto was reminded of why he detested walking as he ascended a rocky mountain path. The distance to be covered at a civilian pace made this feel like an escort mission. Additionally, he initially had trouble getting along with the client for some reason. He heard, "Stop." He questioned, "What's wrong now?" Azula sat on a rock and said, "My feet hurt." Naruto gave Azula a sardonic glance. "I offered to carry you. So you can jump around like a rabaroo?" "I don't think so. How can I trust you not to drop me or that you won't try something? I'm following you unwillingly, remember? I don't want to be tied up in your energy ropes and dragged again." Naruto twitched his eye. "Yes, it is similar to an unpaid escort mission. They're energy threads, and be glad I don't know how to use energy chains yet. It hurts to be tied up in those." All Azula did was roll her eyes. Naruto complained as he sat down. Naruto could arrive at that island in roughly 3 days if he were moving at a ninja's speed, or less than 2 days if he took a plane. Azula asked, "Where is your master exactly?" "Some island," was Naruto's response. Azula gave Naruto a sardonic glance. "That could be anywhere in the Fire Nation, which is made up of only islands. Care to be more specific?" "All I know is that it's north and it'll take at least a week to get to at the rate we're going," he said. "But only 2 days if I carry you." "A week, huh?" With a frustrated groan, Naruto collapsed back onto the rock. Azula thought as she rubbed her feet. Before they met up with this master of his, she had roughly a week to find some supporters and get rid of this idiot. It would be much more difficult for her if she couldn't before they met. Even at her best, Azula doubted that she could defeat both of them in battle. She wasn't even certain she could defeat just Naruto. Naruto was strong, but he was a simpleton, so it would be easy to outsmart him. This master of his, however, would be more difficult to fool. "So this master of yours, is he a firebender or a waterbender?" asked Azula. Naruto remarked, "You sure do ask a lot of questions, Chan. I don't like to travel with people I know nothing about, it's unwise," explained Azula. "So, what kind of bender is he?" Naruto snorted and asked, "Arrow, Sennin, he isn't a bender." Azula blinked. "He's not a bender, then what is he?" Before responding, Naruto rolled his eyes and thought, "A pervert, a ninja. An expert ninja." Azula wasn't prepared for that, but the man wasn't as strong as she initially believed because he wasn't a master bender. Ninjas as cowards who strike from the shadows were still her opinion. She was aware of the strength of a non-bender, but this man was a master. Is he any strong? "Are you kidding? Arrow, Sennin is a cage-level ninja." Naruto could tell by Azula's expressionless expression that she had no idea what he meant. "He's very strong. If we fought him together, the two of us wouldn't stand a chance." Azula laughed. "A non-bender winning against benders of our caliber in a head-on fight. I find that hard to believe." Naruto gave a humorous shake of his head. He got up and brushed his pants off, saying, "Spoken like a person who has never seen jutsu. Anyway, let's get moving." With a snort, Azula followed him. "Because your jutsu is so special." Naruto gave her a snort in return. "As someone who uses both bending and jutsu, I have to say, jutsu is better. I mean, bending is great and all, but it's only elemental manipulation. Jutsu can do that and more, much more. Of course, for elemental manipulation, bending is better. You have much freer control and it's not as much as a drain on your energy reserves." Azula gave him a sardonic glance. He made the case that jutsu is more difficult to practice and energy-intensive. "But then with jutsu you're not restricted to one element." Azula hesitated for a second. "Stop right there. It's impossible to use any more than one element, unless you're the avatar." Naruto corrected her, saying, "No, unless you're the avatar, it's impossible to bend more than one element." Unaware of Azula staring at him, Naruto clarified, "But with jutsu it's possible. Jonin. Level ninja usually can use at least 2 nature types. An elemental jutsu is just one part of ninjutsu. There's also stuff like medical ninjutsu, barrier ninjutsu, space, time ninjutsu, and then there's taijutsu, genjutsu, fuinjutsu." As if it weren't a big deal, Azula followed Naruto as he explained skills like creating illusions, storing objects in scrolls, improving physical prowess, and making paper bombs, which he showed her. She finally lost it when he mentioned calling forth enormous talking animals. He built that house, demonstrated to her that he could walk on walls with just his feet, and created a clone out of a puddle. This is insanity. None of what you've said should be possible by humans, and yet. She recalled. Just what is this chakra stuff that allows you to do this? Naruto let out a moan. It was hurting his head to explain all of this. Sakura was the charge.in.n. Kick.ass type, and he was good at explaining things. Didn't I tell you this already, Chan? Chakra is an energy made by mixing physical and spiritual energy together. What do you mean by physical and spiritual energy? Naruto gave her a strange look in return. Physical energy is energy from the body and spiritual energy is energy from the mind and soul. But shouldn't you know what spiritual energy is? Azula's eyebrow went up. Should I? It's half of what we use to bend. What are you talking about? We use Kai to bend. And what is Kai supposed to be? Naruto asked, squinting after turning around and blinking up at her in shock. With a sly smile, Azula took pleasure in Naruto's apparent lack of knowledge at last. She smirked condescendingly and said, "What's this? The master bender from the future doesn't even know what Kai is." Kai is metaphysical energy that flows throughout the body that we use to bend. Naruto looked at her blankly for a moment before laughing out loud. As Azula saw the younger boy double over, clutching his stomach in laughter, tears in his eyes, her face flushed with embarrassment and rage, she yelled, "What are you laughing at?" Still laughing, Naruto got to his feet and began to walk once more. There's no physical energy in Kai, stupid. You're a master but you don't even know what Kai is. Azula yelled at him, "I know what Kai is. I said metaphysical, not physical, you idiot." Naruto's laughter ceased. Oh, he cocked his head, perplexed. What's metaphysical energy? It's, Azula hesitated, unable to come up with the correct phrase, mystical energy. Naruto paused as well and gave her a doubtful glance. His face then took on an understanding expression. Mystical? You mean like magic? Oh, now I get it. It's not that you're stupid, you're just from the past, you don't know stuff yet. Azula's head developed a tick mark. She snarled, what is that supposed to mean? The blonde took a step back and held his arms in a protective manner. Calm down, Chan. It's just I'm from the future. There are things we invented that don't exist yet and stuff that we figured out about the world and how the body works and other science-y smart stuff like that you haven't yet. Azula put a challenging hand on her hips. Well, Mr. No. It. All. Future. Boy, why don't you explain to me what Kai is? Naruto said, it's spiritual and natural energy. Azula frowned at his response after blinking at the straightforward explanation. There's a third energy. Natural energy. What is this one? As he resumed his stride, Naruto clarified, natural energy is energy that comes from nature. Our bodies absorb natural energy, which we then combine with spiritual energy in our Kai paths before releasing it as Kai. Azula immediately connected that to her own understanding of bending and said, I see. It's an outside source of energy, like the sun and how it powers firebending. Naruto looked up thoughtfully and said, sort of. Heat is the main source of firebending, and the sun produces it. As you can see, there are various forms of natural energy, and each bending art employs a particular type. You say that like each art uses more than one kind, Azula said. With a shrug, Naruto said, well yeah. I'm not exactly sure how many types of natural energy there are, but there's more than 4. How many did you think there were? Naruto explained. He raised an eyebrow in question. The princess raised 4 fingers and began to list them off, saying, 4. The sun, the moon, earth, and air. The sources of each bending art. None of those are natural energy, Chan. They're where natural energy comes from. Naruto stated to her. Azula looked at Naruto, and she couldn't believe it. She didn't want to believe it because that would make her a moron too for following those teachings for the past 12 years, and that simply wasn't possible. That everything she had learned about bending from the best instructors in the Fire Nation, the best and only explanations they have had for centuries, were being broken down and explained in greater detail by a 13-year-old boy. They eventually came to a wide rocky canyon, where they continued to walk in silence for a few minutes before Naruto abruptly stopped and began scanning the area, startling Azula. Really? In the middle of nowhere, out here? What is it? She asked, scanning the area as well but failing to see anything. Naruto closed his eyes and counted each presence he sensed, saying, we're about to have some guests drop by. 5, 11, 18, 34 of them. Additionally, they have encircled us. Men emerged from behind the surrounding outcrops, a total of 34 in number, as multiple streams of fire raced across the ground and joined to form a circle around the 2. As she dropped into a fighting stance, Azula remarked, "You have got to tell me how you do that." Gazing at the fire, Naruto said, "Come on, mountain bandits who can bend fire. Really?" One man, an older man with long graying hair that reached his mid-back and a long, thin mustache, stepped forward and said, "Oh, we're more than simple mountain bandits, boy." Azula identified the man and said, "Hi, General Cheng." "Azula, Princess. This is unexpected," Cheng said. "General? Are these men in the armed forces?" Naruto inquired. Azula examined the man. He was dressed in civilian clothes rather than a military uniform, and his hair was not tied up in a topknot. "No," she said, shaking her head negatively. "This beloved general has deserted." "You're as sharp as always, Azula," Cheng said with a laugh. "They're rebels, then? Which sort of rebels are they?" Azula nodded. "What kind? What are you discussing?" Azula questioned Naruto. "There are 3 different types of rebels. Those who want you as Fire Lord, those who want your father, and those who want themselves," Naruto stated to her. Cheng said, "The boy speaks the truth. Is that correct? So who is it that you support, Cheng?" Azula asked, glancing at Cheng. The former general bowed and said, "Why, you princess, of course." "Bullshit." Cheng gave Naruto a fierce look. "That alone was enough to convince you that he was lying?" Azula questioned him. "When people lie, the rate of their heartbeat changes and I can hear the heart beating with sound bending," Naruto clarified. With an eyebrow raise, Azula said, "Sound bending? A special skill of wind bending. You're not going to believe this boy over me, are you?" Cheng snarled and got to his feet. "We've never been on such formal terms where you can address me without using my title," Azula said, and Cheng gave her a startled look. "Well, actually I already knew you weren't on my side. Additionally, you didn't bow when you greeted me, which indicates that you don't support me and my father, as I would still be his heir." With a defeated sigh, Cheng smirked and signaled his men to advance, saying, "Like I said, you're as sharp as always, not that it'll do you any good in this situation." "Bring it on," Naruto said, cracking his knuckles. "The other night, I defeated 100 soldiers. A little more than 30 will be easy. Don't rush in believing you are unbeatable because that was mostly the result of good positioning rather than your own fighting skills. This time, the circumstances aren't favorable to us," Azula growled. "What?" Naruto blinked. "You were able to move freely through the air and ground the other night, but those men were surrounded by buildings in one direction and had no cover, making it impossible for them to evade your wide-ranging attacks. While we are out in the open with no cover, the enemy has us surrounded and is on the high ground. Are you hearing me correctly?" she questioned him. "Oh no. If you try to attack, you'll be blasted from all sides," Azula sighed. "First and foremost, we must break free from this cycle. Is there anything you can do?" With a smug smile, Naruto said, "No problem." He glanced at the men who were going to fire them. As the flames subsided, Cheng expected to see either 2 charred bodies, 2 perfectly fine teenagers, or nothing, meaning they escaped. He was not expecting to see 2 large charred stones that weren't there before. Cheng frowned as he watched the 2 teenagers get engulfed in fire, not even attempting to defend themselves. Before they could wonder what was happening, red gusts of wind sent several men crashing into the ground. Cheng looked up and immediately jumped back, avoiding a blast of fire. Azula jumped down from a ledge and began attacking him. His men moved in to help, but 4 Narutos jumped out in front of them, shocking them at seeing 4 of the same boy, one of whom had a smoking mouth. "Hido. Housenka no Waza, Phoenix Sage Fire Technique," he said. Another said in a sing-song voice, "You guys are no longer surrounding us." The rebels snarled and threw fireballs at them, but the Narutos swept past them, pulled their fists back as if they were about to firebend, and then surprised them by thrusting forward and opening their fist into a palm, sending 4 of the firebenders flying back. The other rebels stared at him in disbelief. "Did the air bend?" one person asked aloud. One more gave a negative shake of his head, saying, "No way, did you see it? It was red." "Yes, indeed. He can't do both because he was firebending earlier. Unless he was the Avatar." The person who said that got a slap on the head. "You are a fool. The Avatar has a bald head. I'm still trying to figure out how there's 4 of him. That wasn't airbending, you're correct. It's called windbending." Naruto raised his right fist, and a red wind swirled around it. "And I am the Avatar," he said, raising his left fist, which erupted in crimson flames. "The Crimson Avatar," Naruto declared, while 4 clones were smirking darkly behind him. One had 2 tornado fists, and smoke was coming out of his mouth. Another had a few shuriken hovering above his palm with wind, and the final one was channeling his firebending through his kunai, creating fire blades. Azula sidestepped it and fired 2 arcs of fire at the man, who formed a shield of fire to block them and then sent a wave of fire at her feet. Azula sliced through it and fired a bolt of fire that Cheng swept aside because it was normal fire. Azula? Where is that blue fire of which you are so proud? Do you intend to use it as a justification for your defeat? Azula taunted, sorry, but being defeated by my blue fire is an honor you don't deserve. She thrust both hands forward and unleashed a powerful blast of fire, which Cheng managed to block with a wall of fire but could not stop the force pushing him back. Azula kept him off balance by firing weak, quick bursts of fire at his feet, which caused him to stumble back, and then a stronger blast at his chest, which Cheng managed to block but was knocked to the ground. With the intention of killing him, Azula fired another shot at his downed form, but Cheng's blast deflected her shot, and the General flipped to his feet and began punching out fireballs at her, making Azula defensive. 3 more men rushed up and threw fireballs at him, but the clone easily blocked and fired at them with blasts from his mouth and hands. A cage bunchen blasted the man who fired back after rerouting a stream of fire to the side. It was nearly destroyed by a fireball from behind, but a second clone sprang into action, used his fire sword to cut through the flames, and eliminated the assailant. As they walked back to back, the first clone said, "Thanks. Don't mention it. There's something weird about these guys firebending," said the third clone as it landed beside them. "You also noticed it?" As he used his sword to block a fireball, the second clone made a remark. The initial clone scowled and said, "What are you discussing? Their attacks seem a bit too feeble, don't you think?" he was asked by the second clone. With the wind whirling around his wrist, the first clone ducked beneath a fireball and charged forward. "Kazeto. Senpuken, Whirlwind Fist. Isn't it just because they're weak physically?" he asked, driving his wind-enhanced fist into the gut of a rebel, who screamed in agony as he spiraled into several of his allies. "There's more to it than that." He sliced through another blaze, and the second clone shook his head. "It's the fire itself. It seems as though there isn't much there." "Yeah, like there's something missing," said the third clone, nodding. "I've had little trouble using wind to put out their fire." "Are you serious?" "No way. Streams of fire erupted from 4 rebels. I'm not kidding." The other clones were shocked when the flames struck because they had assumed that the fire would feed on the wind, grow, and consume the wind barrier that the clone had created. "What the hell?" blinked the second clone. The third clone informed them, "That's what I said." "Is the boss aware?" the initial clone inquired. The second clone was shocked when the third clone slashed the first clone with a wind blade, dispelling him. "Well, if he doesn't, he will now." "Dude. What?" the third clone shrugged. "I've determined why I shouldn't be expelled. Additionally, of the 4 of us, he eliminated the fewest number of men." Azula jumped out of the way of a fireball and then fired firebolts from her fingers while crouching. Cheng threw his own bolt and swiped away each shot. Azula rolled away and was about to fire, but she had to roll away again when a fire whip struck where she was. Azula was forced to concentrate on avoiding being hit as Cheng continued to lash her with a whip in each hand. Azula abruptly rolled onto her back, executing a sweeping kick and releasing a ring of fire that pushed the whips away. Azula forced herself to stand and gazed at Cheng with a neutral expression that concealed her rage, remembering that final move as one of the more effective moves Zuko used against her in their Agni Kai, which she detested to think about, and feeling angry at how equal she and Cheng appeared to be. Neither had yet to land a solid blow on the other, knowing that it wouldn't have been too hard for her to defeat someone on Cheng's level a few months prior. Was she this much weaker without her blue fire, or was it muscle atrophy from being shackled to a bed for 2 months? "You really are talented. I haven't been challenged like this by men more than twice your age," Cheng acknowledged. Azula laughed. "If only you were aware. But you might want to reconsider using your blue fire if you hope to win," Cheng stated to her. Azula answered, "Cheng, stop thinking so highly of yourself." Growling, Cheng said, "You idiot, have you forgotten what you're in? My men will intervene even if it appears that you will prevail." Azula's eyebrows shot to the left for a moment before she turned back to Cheng with composure. "In the first place, you had no chance. This fight was only for my amusement and could be ended whenever I wanted," Cheng added. "Are you certain of that?" Azula jerked her thumb to the left and asked. As Cheng glanced over, he felt his jaw drop. Naruto was sitting with his legs crossed on a boulder, watching his men, most of whom were unconscious and all of them were tied up, bruised, and battered. "What nonsense this is! How could you allow one child to defeat you?" Cheng let out a cry. Naruto gave him a fierce look and said, "Hey, man, I'm amazing." As though that would explain everything, he said in support of them. The rebel leader was smirked at by Azula, who said, I guess you didn't factor in that you would be fighting an avatar. Avatar? What are you discussing? The avatar is not that. He's actually Avatar Naruto, not Avatar Aang. Unfortunately, I won't be able to finish telling this lengthy tale before I take your life. Azula gathered into a fireball and stalked menacingly in Chang's direction. Chang's calm expression caused Azula to narrow her eyes, and the older firefighter gave her a terrified look before stepping back and taking a deep breath. What is he planning? Chang asked. With electricity trailing from his extended fingers, Chang expanded his stance and swung his arms in broad arcs. With alarm, Azula wondered, since when could he do that? That's lightning. And with big movements like that it's going to be. Naruto said as he stood up, his eyes wide. It's there. Naruto heard one of the rebels say, the ultimate firebending technique that only the Grandmasters can use. As he watched the former general finish the second arc, Naruto didn't like the sound of that. He freaked out when he saw Azula simply standing there and said, "What are you doing? Move!" he shouted as he hurried over to her. Azula waited until just before he fired to move out of the way because there was no cover anywhere nearby to go behind. She feinted to the left, but Chang didn't fall for it and he directed his to the right. Knowing that Chang wouldn't fall for the feint, Azula didn't go left or right, instead dropping to the ground where she stood. I wasn't aware you knew that technique, Azula said coolly as she picked herself up and dusted off her clothes after watching the lightning smash a boulder and sail past her. Yes, well, I only just recently learned it after the passing of the comet. With you that makes 6 people who can generate lightning, said Azula. Chang clarified, 5 people actually. You, General Wu Chang, General Yujin, the Dragon of the West, and myself. Remember, your father is no longer a firebender, he reminded her, grinning cruelly. Azula gave him a fierce look and said, I was considering sparing you. Having a man with your abilities would have been very beneficial, but I don't have the patience to force you to comply right now. She began to make wide arcs with her arms, saying, you may be able to use the lightning generation technique, but you haven't perfected it.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.